So I was a Scrum. What was that called? I was like a
Scrum
Scrum
Master?
breaker. No, Scrum breaker.
Scrum breaker.
Okay.
So I went in and like, we should do this, and like the whole Scrum team is like, we hate you. So I was the Scrum breaker.
What's up, everybody? This is Technogeek from the CTBB pod. So we have a really exciting feature that we are going to be rolling out at the drop of this episode. It is our Discord community. So we are going to be emphasizing a lot of really cool, exciting, exclusive features within the Discord community. We'd love to interact with the people who listen to our pod and love our pod. If you want to chat with other hackers, you want to discuss bugs, we're hoping to have the guests in there as well, although I don't know if they will answer questions. So just, don't ping them and stuff, but we're hoping to have a lot of really awesome people in there to just come and hang out and build an awesome community. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, you can go to ctbb.show/discord, and that will take you right to the Discord server join invite link. We will also be rolling out a couple paid premium tiers. So if you want to financially help support the pod, that would be amazing. It would help pay our editors. It would help us make better content for you. And that's going to have some exclusive stuff that comes with it, like AMAs and masterclass sessions and some exclusive, we're going to show some unredacted bugs, stuff like that. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, let us know and, come join our Discord community. Again, that's ctbb.show/discord, and you can join the community. Hoping to see you there. Peace.
All right, dude, Franz, we're rolling. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. And so actually, before we jump into this episode, I've got to highlight what the heck this thing is behind you. There's like it looks like it's like a framed poster of you with a shell on Google. Is that exactly what that is?
Yeah, it is. It's from 2014, I think.
2014? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
No, yeah, 14. Yeah. Were you born then?
Dude,
no.
Shut up.
Yeah,
that's the year I graduated high school, actually.
Yeah. No, it's I think it was from an XXE, if I recall it correctly.
Wow, that's awesome. Dude, that's nuts. So he's just got like Etsy password from a Google box on the wall behind him. That's pretty freaking neat.
That's amazing.
All right, guys. So as we often do when we start off the Critical Thinking podcast, I'm gonna have to go into Justin's story time a little bit. Okay. So Justin's story time is this. I was at the setting was this. Justin was a new bug bounty hunter, and I had just weaseled my way into my first live hacking event. Okay. And I was very nervous. I was the +1 of a +1. And it was amazing to get to see all of these hackers that I, had respected for so long. But there was one guy in particular, you may be able to guess who, that I had not gone and talked to because I was just too nervous. I was too nervous, man. I was like, there's no way I can go up and talk to Frans Rosén. And I was talking to my wife, Mariah, and I was like, listen, Franz is like a legend. Like, I can't go up and talk to him. And she's like, Justin, you're at this live hacking event. You have to go up and talk to him. And at that event, you had found a crazy bug with an S3 bucket, pulling stuff in and stuff like that. And so I went up and talked to you, and you were so kind to explain the whole bug to me and just chat. And that was my first, fanboy moment where I was like, wait a second, Franz is a real human. What's up with that? So
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's
dude,
an awesome story.
Normally they say don't meet your heroes, but I must say, Franz, you did not disappoint. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's your little flattering intro. For those of you that don't know Franz, Franz is a legend, a hacker, a bug bounty OG. And dude, I'm looking at this plan that we have for this episode, and it's so long. I'm not even sure we're going to be able to get through all of this because there's just so much good content that you've put out. So thank you for that. But before we get into all that, let's go ahead and talk about how you got into bug bounty in the first place, because you got in when it was really early on the scene, and give us a little career walkthrough that brought you to the point where you could do bug bounty.
Sure. I mean, initially everything started off as hiring 2 young people to my company as developers. And these 2 young guys, Matthias Karlsson and Fredrik Almroth, they were lurking always inside in a corner in the office, doing stuff together always. And you didn't figure, like, you couldn't really understand what they were doing. But when you started talking with them, you realized like they were probably like ARP spoofing the whole office.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Laughing.
Okay, so wait, I'm gonna pause you really quickly there. So you at this point you were already an entrepreneur. So you started. You know, you had already started your company.
Yeah. So I can start when I was born. No, just
no.
No. So
take us back.
Yeah, exactly. Take us back. No, so I started as a developer like super early on, and then I built a company together with a business partner of mine, and we hired Fredrik and Matthias. And at that time, I wasn't into hacking. I knew that like sanitize your inputs. That was basically the idea that I knew was something in regards to security. But this was very timed also, because like this was 2010 or 11 or something, and I got curious on what they were doing, and at some point they told us that they were planning on building like a company, like a security company, automating security issues. So we were pretty interested in that, and we started talking more deep around like what would you do, what is the product, and we kind of realized early on that we could do this together, especially because we saw a need for it in terms of what we were building. We were building like e-commerce websites and CMS websites and stuff. So we then created Detectify, and at that point, just when we got started, the bug bounty scene basically was initiated. So it started with like Mozilla, and I think it was PayPal and Google, and I think Facebook was early on as well. And then you had like Russian things as well, and some what was it? There was something else also that was like super early on. I think eBay was early on as well. Like there was a few of those that started, and you basically had like a way to do like research on a huge amount of surface. Like you could test a bunch of things on this attack surface, and so that was very helpful in like getting to understand what they were looking for. But because now you didn't have to like hide or simulate fake things, you could literally like focus on looking for real bugs. So that got me curious on like what should I start with, and I think they basically showed me a bunch of XSS things, and that's where I like started off, and played like XSS was my, you know, where I was born. And then it grew from there. So I think it was very helpful for me to have people next to me that I could ask, and also to you know, whenever I didn't know anything, I could just ask them, and then I could play myself, and then I could come back and like get that feedback.
This is so awesome because you were in a position of, you know, owning this company or whatever, and you hire Matthias. I didn't know that was actually how you met Matthias in the first place. And then you're willing and engaged at a level where, you know, you can say like, hey, what are you doing? And then you start this company with them. Yeah. And it just shows this really, you know, learner mentality. And Matthias is like, absolutely, you know, Matthias is young at this point, right?
Yeah. I think they were drop-offs from the university. I think they were like 18 or 19.
No way.
If even
wow.
that.
So they were really young.
Yeah, absolutely. And they came basically in and like they were okay developers, but they were much better when it comes to like security and security related things. That's when they were like shining in terms of skills.
Yeah, dude.
So we felt that like it's much better for you to like focus on those things than, you know, making an integration with an invoice provider. Like,
please stop writing code.
yeah. No, not really. Like, write other code that is
Right.
like much more fun to
No, that's great.
run.
I've been meaning to get Matthias on the pod as well, so I think I'm going to send him a message right after this episode, because I'd love to hear his origin story as well, and his side of this situation, where he's like, so there's this guy and he hired me onto this company, and then he's like,
exactly.
why are you ARP spoofing the whole office? You know, like
I love that he's like, he probably has a totally different story. He's like, no, I wasn't hired. I
just hacked into this company.
I just showed up one day. Yeah.
I didn't get paid.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly. Okay, so
that's really interesting to hear that like shift. So you were basically just doing entirely like software development. When you learned about like the security side of it, what sort of piqued your interest to like make that pivot that like really drew you towards security? Because I imagine like if you're doing a lot of software development stuff, you probably could have just kept doing that and not made a switch into security. So what was that like draw?
I think so. I've been like, I was building, systems. Like you say you're building a system, but like, what is a system in reality? But I was always like, as a developer, I always try to like, I can reuse this. I need to build this like modular and all these things. So I was always curious on how others were doing it. And this was like, I've realized this probably now after like 14 years, but I kind of know that like through the whole time. But like, I'm super curious on how other people thought about problems and issues. And I've always like, I've almost made it a challenge to myself to write like pseudo-code of how something is implemented, so I can make a black box a white box.
Right.
Just because that's the way I understand how they thought about things, and also that's how you find that specific little if statement that they forgot about.
Sure.
And I think that was the point where I realized that I could do this on other companies and nobody will like get me into trouble, and I can just start poking at them and see what will happen. And I think that was something that I can do this and also get paid. Like, this was something I was poking at before, just figuring out how stuff worked. And now I could do it, help other companies, and also, get paid for it.
Yeah.
So I think that was the trigger to like, okay, I can actually gain knowledge by doing this. And also I have like a side effect of, I can actually, make money for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, go ahead.
No, and I think what happened in the beginning also when we started with the bug bounty was like those money came in to our company so we could fund, this company, like start these other companies. So it kind of, it was like a very, like a beautiful environment of like, we get to poke on other companies and that creates other companies. And it's like, it was a very nice, circling effect of hunting for bugs. And
you see this a lot with bug bounty origin companies, right? Like in the beginning when you're trying to like make ends meet and stuff like that, you can even use bug bounty to fund your own company, right, as income into the company. So I think that provides a really nice launching place for bug bounty hunters to become entrepreneurs in that context.
Yeah, for sure. There are many that has like popped up.
Yeah. And I actually was just speaking to another one this morning who we'll have on the pod. So there's definitely that's one of the things I'm really interested in is bug bounty plus entrepreneurship. So we'll definitely cover more of that later. And I've actually got a section on this doc, if we get through all of it, to pick your brain a little bit more about that. But I think you said a really interesting thing relating to how you think about hacking, which was that you try to write pseudocode so that you can kind of understand how the developers would have written this code and turn it, from a black box into a white box. And I kind of saw this when we were collaborating at the last live hacking event we were at. And you did a great
get
job
like
with
small
that.
indicators, and that this indicator confirms that they've done something like this, because if this doesn't happen, then and it turns almost into a game where you can like, I'm gonna guess what happens if I do this. I'm going to get an error. And I'm like, yes, I'm getting an error. Okay. Then I know that they've done this and that. Yeah, exactly. Like
that's, and I think that's probably one of the things that makes you such a good exploiter exploiter,
I don't know.
exploitationist.
Yeah.
You know, like I
Poker.
don't know the actual word, but
Yeah.
you know, someone who's really able to take an issue and just poke until you turn it into a crazy vulnerability. So that's definitely a cool tip for anybody who has that sort of developer-like brain to kind of you know, really be intentional about theorizing, because I think to some degree we're all doing this a little bit when we're hacking.
Absolutely.
But I think if you take that extra step and really start thinking in the forefront of your brain, hey, how did they write this? How is this? How can I confirm this? You know, what little errors might tell me whether it's this or that?
Exactly.
You can flesh it out a lot more.
And it's the same thing, like when you've done it with one place and they have done, you know, a similar thing somewhere else.
Yeah.
Then you can like start comparing them and like, okay, but it behaves differently there. And like you can, so as soon as you've done that for like one code block, you can see other implementations in the same company. If you've done a mistake on one, like that happens a lot. Like there's one single thing that makes everything break.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joel. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's almost like two different buckets of this type of stuff when you're doing testing, where like the cat just he's part of the show too. Yeah, but there's almost like two buckets where like you can, there's like lots of like almost totally like out of left field type of stuff where you'll test, you'll be like, maybe they did this, maybe they did that, like you never know, maybe they made this weird mistake, like I saw this somewhere else. And then there's the very like logical approach where you think about it so sort of basically as if you're one of the developers, or you're coming from the developer's perspective, which is you know some of the technologies that they're using, you know some of the common mistakes that happen within those languages and those technologies. And so you can sort of piece things together. You can try things that are a little more targeted towards, like, say you're testing, you know, a Java application.
Absolutely.
You're going to test stuff that's similar to Spring, or, you know, you're going to be testing for like Java specific things instead of like Ruby issues or JavaScript issues. And that type of testing, like, it's not to say that if you test a Ruby issue on a Java stack that like maybe there's something further down the line that might pop. And you know, but oftentimes having that context as like a developer is really, really useful, because you have that like that background of like, oh,
and
maybe
I would say,
you know, this is something weird that they might have done.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things you're mentioning there is like I don't know why, I think people are talking about it in a different context, but like typing is like one of the best things and one of the worst things in combination that you can use. Like that's one of our biggest tools that we have is when, like, for example, when you have PHP, you don't have typing. So that's where what you have there is like, then you can start figuring out where they screwed up and thought it was an int, but it's a string. And in other languages, it's like, just because you have the typing errors, you can start fussing, you know, variables that didn't exist because you're getting a typing error. And so like, when you think about it, like that's one of my best clues that there's, you know, that I can hunt for things, is like typing issues or typing errors, basically. Yeah,
absolutely. And I feel like that's a really good transition into one of the tools that you wrote. I don't, when was this, like 2017 or something? This S3 decloaking tool, or this bucket disclosure tool. Yeah, do you want to like talk about that a little bit? Because you did a whole blog post and stuff, but I feel like I've got you.
Yeah, the blog post is so what happened with that blog post was like I had fun bugs that I wanted to explain, but then I realized, okay, I need to take one step back. Like, do people know what this is? And like, do people know why this bug happens? And do people know what S3 is? And then like, do people know what internet is? And like that the blog post just grew up. No. Did I lose you?
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, so it's looking right now. It says you're 1% uploaded. Do you have
I see 1% uploading.
Do you have, so normally...
But it goes from 1 to 0 always.
Yeah, so do you have a way to like make your internet stronger? Like, are you Etherneted in right now, or are you...
I can try. I wonder what I have for... what I have on my phone instead, because it's weird, because it says, wow, maybe could I have been the stupid person in the room?
What did you do?
I don't want to say.
He's got proxy on right now.
I turned it off. I think it
now
worked.
He's at 9% uploaded. That was definitely it. All right. So, all right.
It goes to S3.
What do you mean it goes to S3?
Wait. I need to check my Oh fuck yeah! Sorry, it was my mistake.
You had proxy on?
So yeah, everything went through burp, man.
Dude, that's hilarious. Okay, so we've been dealing with some issues with Franz cutting in and out for this past like 20 minutes. And you know what it was? He left freaking burp proxy on. So classic hacker mistake here.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure where it cut out, but we'll bring it back around.
Rest in peace, burp state.
Yeah, dude, your burp file just blew up. But yeah, okay. So you talked a little bit about the testing methodology where you're thinking about the code structures. You're thinking about things like variable typing. I will say, when you said typing for the first time, I was like, yeah, man, everybody types when they're hacking. I was like, what the heck are you talking about? Typing is one of our greatest tools.
Talking about typing as well.
Oh my gosh, that's really funny. But so I guess I wanted to dive a little bit into that. So we've seen the side already. Or at least we've talked a little bit about the side of like exploitationist Franz. Once you see a weird issue, you poke at it, you model out the code. You're thinking about how the developer would have implemented it, and you're thinking about how you can validate those assumptions by triggering different edge cases throughout the code base. I'm curious about fleshing a little bit more out about your hacker methodology, because one of the things we've seen in the past with hackers that have come on here is that you have a couple extremes, right? You have people that are, that go really hard on the recon stuff, and you've got people that go really hard on the on the manual hacking stuff, right? And so there's definitely different types of hackers, but I've seen you do both, and I think when you've got someone that can do both, it creates a crazy result. So but I did want to ask you, if you identify a little bit more as one or the other. Do you identify a little bit more as a manual hacker or as a wide hacker, focusing on recon to find weird stuff, or do you see yourself as a mix of the two?
So I began mostly. So I think it's a matter of difference in terms of like where I'm at. Like, so I would say I started off, of course, manual, because everybody does that. You need to figure out what to do before you can automate it.
Sure.
I then went into like full on automation. Like I wanted, but there was always like I always had the argument on like, you can't automate if you don't know what you're looking for. And if your whole idea is to find something you don't know of, you can't really automate it all. So I was never a full-on automationist, if that's a word. I was more on like, I automated a bunch of things. I knew what I was looking for, but then I always kept this thing where I'm like, I'm going to save it all and I'm going to look through it and I'm going to see the oddities myself. Because I don't know what I will find. Things will happen much faster than my knowledge about what it is, basically. But then it came, I think it happened, I took a break from bug hunting, or like break. It was probably like 1.5 years or something, like probably during COVID mostly. Where I didn't want to do any live hacking events. I wasn't really looking for bugs in any way during almost 2 years, I think. And when I came back, I kind of realized that, similar to, I think, what other bug hunters that like want to start off realize, is that there's so many people that are doing automation that is like ridiculous. Like seriously, like they do things so fast. I spoke a lot about my automation back in the day, and I told them like, I'm doing like every 8 hours I'm looking, and they're like, every 8 hours? I'm doing it every 20 minutes.
Every 8
and I'm
seconds,
like, exactly. And I'm like, they're like, you're missing out on so many things. I'm like, I can imagine. And I'm like, do I want to invest the time to like speed up my automation just for those bugs? And it came to the conclusion that like, no, I don't. I rather spend manual time trying to figure out really cool bugs than trying to like like reach to the point where I'm like at level with other automationists.
Yeah, no.
Automationists, I love that word.
Yeah,
like, it's awesome word.
I think we're going to coin
it's like
that term.
Arts and
automationists. You know, I and it's actually funny. You know, I actually had that exact same path. You know, except I sort of skipped the part where I was doing manual hacking in the beginning, like because there were so many resources by the time I started. You know, when I started, I guess in 2017, 2018, you know, you had already put out talks, you know, people were putting out talks on how to do stuff. So I had a pretty decent flow of like bug bounty write-ups and stuff like that to read. And then I leveraged into automation. But then I came to the same conclusion you did, which is like, well, maybe a little bit different of one, but essentially in order to compete at this game at the top level, you have to be constantly refactoring your code. And it's a grind, right? And it's going to make it more of you're going to become more of a programmer than you are of a hacker, because you know, you're constantly having to refactor code. And so I also sort of leveraged a little bit more, or switched over into manual hacking a little bit more, and it's been fun to see the results of that as well.
I think, like, and when I think about it, like when I mentally think about like what do I wanna like end up with, or like what do I want to succeed with, it's not that I like, oh, I dream of finding a unclaimed S3 bucket. Like that's really not the bug that I'm like I will go home and be happy about. The bug I will go home be happy about is the one where I'm like, I did this thing over there and that gave me a little piece of the puzzle, and then I went over there and did that, and now I can access the server like with an RC. Like those are the kind of bugs that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna feel so proud, and it's like it's gonna hold up for, you know, more than a week, probably sometimes a year. That bug has the value of like, and I will not find that by writing automation and finding an unclaimed bucket, or you know, environment variable file laying somewhere. That might be helpful into doing other things, but you know, the fun things happen when I go deep. So I absolutely shifted over to like go deep, full on, you know, go, you know, so deep that people are like, but move on, man. Like, stop looking at that thing. But I'm like, keep digging, and like sometimes there's something falling out from it, and like you realize, you know, and I have all these examples of, you know, running on a private program, but still, you know, grinding it for months, and even collaborating with Matthias in this case, and like we couldn't figure one thing out, and it was like, how does this work, and why is it happening? And like he was at a concert. I think it was, I don't know if it was like Iron Maiden or something, but he was at a concert and I was writing him messages, because we often chat without the other one responding. Like that's how we communicate. Like asynchronous, very, very much asynchronous. And I was writing to him like, okay, but this worked. Like, I don't know. And like, it took probably 2 or 3 hours. And that chat message history is like, is a beauty of itself. Because it's like, this happened. Oh, I think oh my God. Like, it ended up in like being like total disaster. And it was like, you know, ring the bells. And it was like one of the most beautiful bugs I've ever seen. And it was just that grind of like, we've been having this for months, knowing that there's something there, but we couldn't figure it out, and it came to that conclusion. It's like, it's so beautiful, and it's like, that's the kind of bugs I want to like continue to, you know, bring home, or, you know, talk about in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like for a long time there was this, like, there was a lot of manual hacking that went on, and then there was like a few years, kind of like right before COVID, like around COVID, and then like during COVID, where like a lot of people realized that there's so much scope and there's so much stuff out there that you can make a lot of money just by doing automation. And like automation isn't a particularly difficult thing. There's a lot of tools out there, stuff like Nuclei and all these like frameworks and things that exist that let you kind of just like duct tape and bootstrap stuff together and just like build these little pipelines that do like a lot of like really efficient work. And so a lot of people just really like dove headfirst into that and just started like scanning for stuff, finding subdomain takeovers, finding bucket takeovers, finding like, you know, CVEs that you could just like automate into, you know, easily reproducible reports and bugs. And like, it's almost like a separate bug bounty space.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it's like you're basically at this point, you're not really like fighting over like complexity of bugs or like how this app like interacts with other parts of the app or how this service or this website might like, you know, be leveraged by another part of the application or another part of the company. It's more just like how fast is your tooling and like how good can you beat the other person? Is your internet better? Is, you know, is your scanning faster? Are you looking at the right things?
Yes.
And
I agree.
I really love this manual hacking type of mentality. Like me and Justin have discussed this a little bit because as a full-time hunter, I think it's a lot easier to either fall more towards automation or at least towards like less complex findings because you need that cash flow. You need to be having reports going in all the time.
Sure.
But I also like, I love not feeling obligated to have reports in because that gives you that opportunity to do what you're talking about, like go deep with the application, get intimate, as we like to say, and just like really like learn the ins and outs of this application, become like almost a developer essentially at the company where you understand more about how stuff is going on in the back end than even somebody who works at the company does, because that really gives you all those insights into where stuff is like faltering or where there might be weird mechanisms or these systemic patterns like you talked about, where, you know, you realize, oh, this is like a common mistake or pitfall that they've made. Maybe they made this here and here and here and so on. And I just love that mentality of just like, you know, ignore the sort of the flash and the glamour and stuff, and just like bug after bug after bug and find that really, really cool deep shit.
And I agree. I think one of the, so I went full bug hunting mode last, I would say in beginning of September, October, kind of. And the decision I made was happening during that summer. And because I had those kind of, you know, anxious things also, like, will I be able to like pay my own salary, or like, how can I figure out the economics around doing this full time? And at that point, I had luck because I did a few Zoom on, like bugs on Zoom, and they paid me out that summer, and they paid really well for those bugs. So at that point, I'm like, okay, this is my buffer. So I have a buffer now of like, if I would take like my normal salary, I would like last these amount of months. Okay, so these months I can figure out if I should, you know, go automation or continue doing, because those bugs I found was like no automation. It was just like trying to figure out how everything worked. And I used that time to like figure out first, like, where should I hunt? Like, what program takes care of me? What program, you know, treats my bugs in a way that I feel appreciated, or like they value my time? And then also like economical wise, like where should I spend my time to like align the return on investment in a way that makes me not stressed, you know, going forward. And when I figured those things out, like where to look, I still trying to figure out like what programs I should focus on. But when I figured out some of it, at least, that helped me a lot into like deciding that going deep was actually, you know, monetary wise, a good decision for me to like, don't be afraid that I won't be able to pay myself a salary. Basically.
Yeah. I think you definitely see, if you look at the numbers, I think you'll see a higher return on investment of time, right? And a higher hourly rate if you do deep bugs. But the thing with automation is you get to have this, and I experienced this when I was in the automation game. If you take time off, you still get bugs. Right.
Yeah.
Which is just huge for like relief. Right. You know, like, because I don't know what it is for me, but like, even if I have a ton of money sitting in the bank, if I see that trending downward while I'm taking a break, or if I know like, hey, I'm not finding bugs right now, that just bothers me. You know, and
I can imagine
it's kind of like it's definitely a psychological problem, you know, for sure. But because I think you should be able to rest in both states, whether you just popped, you know, 100K in bugs and now you take, you know, a couple weeks off and you've got that 100K sitting in the bank and you're like, all right, I'm fine. Or whether you've got, you know, 20K in the bank and you see it going up and up and up and up with the bugs, you know, those are the same things. But you know, psychologically it's very different, I think.
We also have a whole episode about like picking the right program. And I think you covered this a little bit, but it's really important, especially like when you're doing full-time hacking, to have the right program.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, like
for sure.
once you find like a program who really respects you as a researcher and your reports and like handles the things that you're submitting and takes it very seriously and is like, you know, responsive and all these types of things, like it makes a really big difference to like I almost want to say that it increases the quality of the bugs that you find later on, because like you have this relationship with the company where you want to show them like, hey, I found this really cool thing on your app. Like, let me show you, like, let me take it one step further. Like, let me, you know, I bet you thought that last bug was cool, but how about this one?
Yeah,
And like,
exactly.
It's almost like a challenge.
Yes.
And if you find a company that not only treats you right, but pays correctly, like if you have a program, say they pay like 5K crits and their mediums are like 750, a couple media, like you know, you're at like 5 mediums, you're almost there, right? And so it's like if you have automation that's finding a bunch of mediums versus it takes you a week or two to find like a really bad crit, but it's only going to get paid 5K, then that trade-off isn't always worth it. But if you have a program that's paying like 30K crits and maybe their mediums are like 1 or 2K, well, that makes a big difference. And then your time is really, really worth like spending that time finding that critical and not spending it doing automation or like trying to find a subdomain takeover.
Yeah, let me jump in here and say, you know, I think we've made it clear enough, but I want to clarify. We have tremendous respect for people on both sides of the game. You know, and
100%.
and you know,
100%.
there's definitely so many challenges of recon and so many challenges of deep diving stuff. So but hopefully this has given a little bit of insight into the thought, because I think all of us, Joel more so than me, but you know, have leveraged a little bit more into the whole finding very high impact bugs, you know, with the majority of your time, and Franz as well. And so, okay, but we've already been talking for a while, and I'm 2 bullet points down on my little list. So let me.
Just the start of the episode, he's like, we got so much to cover. For like 30 minutes, we've talked about 2 topics.
Yeah, I'm like super stressed over here because
Bam.
Yeah.
Next.
Let me get back to my list, okay?
Yeah.
No, okay. So I do want to ask a couple things, and we'll keep these pretty rapid fire, I think. So, you know, you said you identify more now as sort of a deep dive hacker, which I think is on point. And so. And I think I know the answer to this because you already alluded to it, but I'm wondering how much time it takes you how much time you normally spend on a program on average, and how much time it normally takes you to find some bugs that you're proud of.
I would say, so I haven't jumped between programs that much since I started with this methodology, but the times I've done it during these 2 years, I would say, I think, and this is like where the imposter syndrome also hits hard every time. It's because whenever you change or switch program, you basically have these, you know, sometimes for me it can take up to like 3 days until I actually find, you know, something that I think is relevant or valuable. Yeah. And so and I've trained myself to not, like, you know, you feel shit during that time. Like you hate yourself and you think you're a fraud, and you know, all these kind of, you know, thoughts come up. But at some point you're like, okay, but no, I know this time is there. You need to invest the time. And, you know, because, and it's interesting also because if you compare the first day, you see a bunch of, you know, variable names or like parameter names and like, what is this? I have no idea. I just want to find a bug, like ignore what they are. Like, and the third day you're like, oh, I know exactly what that parameter does and like what it does. Okay. So that's why. So you need to like spend those 3 days to like get that, you know, mindset of like the taxonomy, for example. Taxonomy is a huge thing. Like, what do they call, you know, this kind of object and model? Like, as soon as, so I tend to like write down taxonomy for myself just to like understand what is referencing what. And at some point, like, that's also a really good receipt for, okay, they're calling it a little bit different here. Like they use, you know, a Pascal case over here, but there's snake case over there. And like those kind of things is like indicators that there are multiple people doing things here, and they've named it differently. Like, that's an indicator. And those things takes probably like 3 days to realize that this is an outlier, for example.
So let me just highlight that just for the listeners, okay? Do you guys hear the level of depth that he's describing here? He's describing the case of parameters, and he's taking notes on the verbiage, the wording, the taxonomy of the various parameters and endpoints, and this is the kind of stuff that you would think is getting too minute, too detailed, but is totally not.
No,
because every single thing, every time you go that deep, you get a further and further, just a little tiny bit closer to understanding what it's looking like for this whole application, and that little step by step there makes all the difference in the world when it comes to sort of black box texting, when at the end of the day you're totally looking at a black box. You have no idea what you're working with. So
and there's some good tricks.
The 3-day number, I'm with you, man. Like
I mean, there's some good tricks you can do. Like sometimes I just take the full scope and I search for the host in burp search, and then I copy everything into an XML file, and I have like an unpack burp state or unpack burp list. And then I take the body of the request, and then I take all the words I have, and then I sort them and make them unique. And then I can see like, okay, there's like intent ID, but there's intent underscore ID. And then suddenly I can like go that way to like find oddities in parameters as well. Those if you got intent ID snake case and intent underscore ID, those are parameters that were clearly implemented by different developers, right? Or different, lifecycle flows right there, right? And so, there's definitely a good chance that if every single intent uppercase I ID is secure, that sometimes the intent underscore ID will not be secure. Right. So having that sort of frameworks in place can really help you understand, that the app from a holistic perspective, and just take, also, I just want to shout out that ability to take notes or not necessarily take notes, but like to process the data that you've got there, exporting to burp, taking the time to write the XML unpack script, which is something I've never done, by the way, because it's just such a pain in the ass. I can share it. It's awesome.
That would be great. It is something that will differentiate you from other hackers, right? You don't even have to know that it's the right thing to do. So many people are like, man, should I spend my time doing this? Doesn't matter. It's going to make you unique as a hacker. Let's say you do that, nothing comes of it. You still saw more of the application than someone else who hasn't done that, right? You looked at those parameters a little bit differently, because you unpacked everything. So it's the things that make us unique hackers like that really allow different people to find different crazy bugs.
Yeah. I also think that there's like a whole aspect, like the whole becoming almost like a developer within that environment, where if you learn the terminology and you learn what things mean, so many developers use abbreviations and stuff to like represent things. Like they might take something that represents some system, right? And they might abbreviate it as 3 characters and just start using that as an acronym, like throughout their application, throughout different endpoints or parameter calls and stuff. A lot of times I'll look at something like that and I'll say what is this? Like, what is this, these 3 letters? What is this supposed to mean? Like, what does this represent to the developer? And once you identify at a lower level, like, what does this actually mean? What are they referencing when they're saying, these 3 characters or whatever? You can really start to unpack hidden functionality and this type of stuff that may even exist that, you'll start to stretch to different ideas. Like, maybe if they're calling an endpoint with a different 3-letter acronym, maybe I can toss my 3-letter acronym that I know what this means. Maybe I can hit a different service or something, right? And I think like getting to that level of just being like, what does that mean? Or what is this parameter doing? Or what does this represent? Can let you get that much deeper understanding and be able to dive deeper within the application so much easier.
Yeah, 100%. So let me ask this then. I have seen, I'm thinking specifically at the last live hacking event we were both at, when we were sitting at this table and we were like slamming our heads into a wall on this one specific bug for a while. How often do you find yourself sitting in front of a request and trying things sort of incessantly versus sitting back, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the bug? Like, and I know that this is kind of a hard question because it's very, abstract, but just give me your gut your gut feelings on how much time you spend actually hands-on iterating versus just sort of thinking and ideating.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of things I tend to do when I get to the point where I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Like it's everything from, collecting my own kind of word list from that asset, just to like find, things in there that like can make me understand what this is. Up to the point where, as you said, like I take a walk and I'm like thinking about it and like why does it behave like it does, or what is it trying to, what data is it trying to fetch or similar. So sometimes I would say both work. Sometimes, complete brute together with very context related information.
Yeah.
Like, for example, generic word lists for me is not really helping that much. I wouldn't say that, word lists found on, a really large word list works that well. The ones that work are when you can like apply the context to what you're actually looking at. That's when you're getting the nice hits. But in the other aspect also is like sometimes you just need to think about it, and Google error messages is like an awesome thing as well. As soon as you see an error message that is like, this is not a generic error message, like then you can start digging down, like maybe it's this, and maybe this is the database I'm injecting into, or whatever.
Or even maybe an error message that kind of looks like a generic error message, but is
but
worded specifically, you know?
Or it has like, a format that is very, very different from. Also, like if error messages look the same on a target and suddenly one error message doesn't, that is also like, okay, all the other ones had, square brackets around the error code, but this one does not. Like those could be also indicators that, okay, there's another thing causing this error message.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like one of the really underutilized things is Googling stuff with quotes around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the time. It's just like if I see an error,
if
you Google something with quotes around it,
and
it does the exact. Exactly. Like that, we did that at the last event. The thing that we're talking about right now. It's just like, what is this? Like, what is this system? What is this using? What is this technology? And just search the error message, and immediately there's 100 Google results all mentioning the same exact thing. And you're like, oh, okay, it's that.
Okay, that's it.
So last question about the hacker methodology piece. So it seems like you spend a good amount of time on your targets. Give me just sort of like a gut feeling on like how much time you spend on the average target.
I would say 3 days is an investment first. You might not get anything from it. So I've done this like short assessments kind of thing where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna focus on this program, and what has happened for me is like 1.5 week. Is a time for me where I know I'm gonna find something good. I don't know how bad it will be, but I know I will find something that will be good. So 1.5 week has been a really good way for me. But also like you have kids, so it's like you don't know where you're gonna spend that 1.5 week. Are you gonna spend it on the night? Are you gonna spend it in the office times, or are you gonna spend it like at all? Like there could be and often like when you submit a bunch of bugs at the same time, or like in the matter of days, you always have this triage massage that is like it can be, especially like my reports are like sometimes 2,000 to 4,000 words. My reports are insane, man. Like they are my blog posts are sometimes small compared to my blog posts.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm writing them manually. It's not like copy pasting a boilerplate of like how it's actually like step by step showing, sometimes I'm showing even how I came to the conclusion that there's a bug, and I have like a very long impact explanation, and everything is like typed from the frontal cortex.
Like, 100%.
But
so true.
But then you have that half week afterwards is like triage massage basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just
there's
to
always
get
that
it through.
like getting through.
Yeah,
you get it through.
it's-
They find out it's not a dupe, and then it's another week of yes, this is how you reproduce it.
Yeah,
Have
but
you tried this?
that's a good side effect also of going like deep into a program. Like live hacking events are an exception to the rule, but I haven't duped once in all like this full time since August last year. Except for live hacking events.
You've duped me, you stupid
absolutely.
fricker on.
Yeah.
Like I was like, and we'll bleep that if we need to. So like, let's say for example, that program, right? That was a challenge, and so how long would you spend on something like that?
That one I spent. I to be honest, that one was new for me, so I didn't know what to expect. So I submitted that bug only.
And of course,
it was 2 hours or something. Yeah, I mean, I didn't spend shit on that. But the funny thing was that I think it was very valuable for me not to spend more time, because I had a hunch that they might not be as,
receptive to that vulnerability
receptive to the report as I thought. So in that sense, I think I did a good investment not to spend more time.
Yeah.
And that's also a thing where you like, especially when it comes to new programs, I'm like very, very restrictive on like the worst thing you can do is like you spend much time, you find a really bad bug, and then you continue and you submit bugs and you have no response yet. And you're like investing so much time, and then suddenly they respond and they don't treat you in a good way.
Yeah.
And you're like, why did I continue?
Yeah, you spoke really wisely.
I've heard that before from other people in the podcast also. It's like, don't invest too much in the beginning. Like you won't gain anything from submitting 50 bugs in the beginning. You're only gambling with your own time. Like, don't do that.
Absolutely.
You can gamble with that time when you know the receiver and you know what to expect from them.
You have to validate the program and validate your threat model, because on one hand, it could be the program just being shit, right? That's one possibility. They could just be a bad program.
Or you have misaligned your exactly. What you think is a threat, or
you could have misaligned your threat model, and that's not anybody's fault, except maybe one could argue that the team should have provided more insight into their threat model.
Sure.
In their policy, which I would love to see more of in general. But like you said, it's a gamble if you're not validating that threat model in advance, because it's very easy for issues to come out of that.
For sure.
And so, okay, all right. First section of my notes are done here.
Yes.
So
awesome.
here's where I'm thinking we're going to go from here. Okay. I have compiled together, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 articles, some of the best hacking articles I've ever read, written by Franz over the years, starting in 2017, spanning all the way up to, I think, 2022 or 2023, the latest one. And I just want to kind of walk through these and talk about mentality. I want to talk about the technical details of them. So I hope you reviewed them, because I don't know about you, but if I wrote something, 6 months ago and then somebody asked me about it, 6 months later, then I'm screwed, because I don't remember anything. But we'll see. Yeah. Okay, so the first one, and we'll link all these in the description as well. It's not even something that I would recommend. It is mandatory reading for any listener of critical thinking to go and read all of these. So please keep that in mind. The first one that I wanted to talk about was this whole AWS S3 thing. So if any, for the listeners here, S3 bucket takeovers and S3 bucket issues now are it's one of the most it's one of the hottest topics in cloud security. And all of this originates with this man right here, Franz, who sort of coined the S3
Thanks
bucket.
For the credit.
The S3 bucket takeover. And so I want to kind of, flash back to 2017 here. You're seeing this new technology sort of coming on the scene, and you're seeing it implemented in lots of different places on all these different programs. How do you identify this issue of
it
S3
was
buckets?
actually earlier. It was actually 2014. The first blog post about it was in 2014, October, I think.
Yeah.
And back then it was basically, you know, every time you saw a 404, you just moved on.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's nothing is there, right? So I think we came to the conclusion, I think it was both S3 and there was something else that was also I think Heroku was
Yeah.
and GitHub
Yep.
Pages was one of those. So I think we just came to the realization, because we were looking at Detectify was getting built at the same time, and a lot of things we were doing was around, you know, finding subdomains and trying to identify what they were running. And at some point, I think we figured out that okay, so we started signing up on these you know,
providers,
I think it was Shopify as well, these SaaS services, and suddenly realized that you could just there were no verification at all. We were under the assumption in the beginning that you need to validate your that you own the domain, because that's how you do, you know, everything else when it comes to Gmail, or, you know, when you want to run Gmail, for example. And realize that, okay, nobody's actually doing this, because it's a convenience thing to not use that validation part. And we started reaching out to all these companies and writing okay, somebody can just hijack all these companies because they're pointing to you. And some of the providers were just yeah, but they're not our customer anymore. So why?
Oh my gosh!
Reading between the lines, that was what they were saying. It's not our fault that, you know, they're not paying us anymore, or, you know.
You mean somebody's gonna have to pay us to hack them? I like that. To hack someone that's not our customer? Yeah.
Go for it. No, but so I think and a lot of them were we already know about this. This is no big deal.
Sure.
And we were screaming loud, please do something about it. Add a validation, do, you know, whatever, something, you need to do something. And when everybody responded, not a single company responded with yeah, you're right.
Oh my gosh.
We realized we need to get it out there. And then it was just a matter of how many more are there. And I think the first blog post we had 14 maybe providers, big providers that we decided to announce. But at the same time, there were, you know, a huge amount popping up since then, of course, still popping up to this day. And S3 is one of those that keeps on lingering. I know that there are some changes happening, or you can't change S3, but you can do implementations above it that is safe. So there's something called S3 access points, which is their addition to it. And access points always get a unique hash in it, so you can't reclaim an access point. So that's AWS solution to the problem, is to make access point the way to actually access a bucket. But yeah, I think and one of the big challenges in the beginning also when it comes to S3 was to figure out what the bucket name was. It wasn't always clear, even though you have it in the error message, it wasn't always clear what the bucket, and especially sometimes you do want to know the bucket name even if it exists. And I think that was the whole idea with the bucket disclose, was to figure out what the bucket was named, because if you knew what the bucket was named, you can make additional API calls on the side to that bucket to see access level errors and stuff.
Yeah. That's such an amazing little script there. And we'll link it down below. We'll link it down below, and it does still work to allow you to identify what the name of a bucket is. And there's lots of really cool error-based stuff you can do with that too, where you're creating invalid signed URLs that fail in such a specific way that it leaks the bucket name. So cool.
We have the same on.
I love this.
Me and Matthias built a same one in the beginning of this year for Google Cloud Storage.
Nice.
So we have seven decloaking methods for cloud storage, and it's kind of helpful in cloud storage as well, because sometimes you really want to know the name.
Yeah.
And it's very important for depending on how your setup looks like. So I think I will talk with Matthias to get it out as well. I think it's very fun to have.
That's awesome. Decloaking. I love that terminology, because I think this applies to more than just S3 buckets, where it's very similar to like origin server
Yeah.
detection, where
For sure.
if you're trying to bypass a WAF, for example,
Yes.
you find what the origin server is, or a way to talk to the origin server directly. And mimic is if your requests are going through the WAF, then oftentimes you can just bypass the WAF directly. And it's very similar to like S3, where you might have some subdomain that's maybe it's talking to a backend service instead of actually just being a CNAME to the bucket directly. And if you can figure out some way to error it, or get it to basically oracle to what the bucket is, then you can maybe read some data that you shouldn't have access to. Maybe you can list the bucket, maybe you can do whatever. It really depends on the context. But I love that methodology.
The decloaking is applicable in so many aspects, like you mentioned as well, like with a reverse proxy or an origin structure. If you can leak that backend URL, there's a decent chance that you might be able to use that in a vhost, somewhere else at a load balancer level, and hit that backend server directly and just bypass all of the middleware authentication that they've got in place. So we've seen that time and time again, and it's an awesome technique, and that's another one of the things that kind of comes out of the security research is the impact, the conceptual impact is very wide reaching, right? It's applicable to lots of different areas, which is really cool. Okay, so there's lots of other stuff you can dive into with this blog post that will link and actually I didn't even have the one. I'm looking back now because you said there's one in 2014, and then there's also another one which I missed in 2016 where you're talking about CloudFront stuff and that
was fun. That was good memories.
And the trailing dot, dude.
Yeah.
Like
there was a bug like in a live hacking event, right?
Yeah.
Just like 2 years ago or something, that one of the best bugs in that live hacking event was a trailing dot.
Yeah.
So it still happens.
So for those of you, excuse me, for those of you that don't know about that, actually, Frans, why don't you tell them a little bit about trailing dot and what that does conceptually?
Yeah. So I think the blog post mentions specifically CloudFront. So what happened with CloudFront was that when you went to, in this case, it was like PayPal.com. It wasn't PayPal.com. I think it was car.com. So you went to car.com and you would be served a page through Cloudflare. But the whole idea with like how internet works or like the www works was that you can always add a trailing dot.
Cloudflare or CloudFront?
CloudFront.
CloudFront. Okay. Yes.
CloudFront. Yeah. You can always add like a trailing dot to a domain.
Yeah.
Because it's called like a FQDN, like a fully qualified domain name is actually ending with a dot. They've just removed it for simplicity or something.
Yeah.
So a trailing dot should always, serve similar things or just give an error or whatever. And in CloudFront, it gave an error, but it gave the error that looked like nobody has claimed that domain. So I went into CloudFront. Now you can't do this anymore because CloudFront wants you to validate that you own the domain. But back then you could just add it as a CNAME to your CloudFront, and it had like a client-side validation. So you couldn't add a trailing dot. It would say you can't. But if you like capture the proxy, if you take it was like a gRPC request, and you modified that little thing in the request with a dot, you would add that to your own host. And then you could serve whatever you want on the trailing dot. And funny thing was that CloudFront has cookie logging. So it will log your cookies also. And cookies are working both on the FQDN and the regular domain. So if you had cookies sign into PayPal or car.com and then went to car.com I would get your cookies.
Wow.
And I started getting those logs, and I saw like people were clicking on emails. And then I realized, why are they getting this from clicking on emails? Because they write, please, hello, my dear friend, go to car.com . And then the dot would be, included in the link because, it's a link, right? So that was the reason why so many came to the dot domain, because it was like in the end of a sentence.
Wow. So this doesn't even really require user interaction at that point because people are just going to that domain natively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, dude.
So that was the scary part. And it was a long process from that part. Like PayPal obviously fixed it by reclaiming it themselves.
Yeah.
But then it was a long discussion with AWS also getting them to like, you need to normalize this. And so they also treated this as a bug themselves.
Wow.
Do you feel like a lot of the bugs that you found have led to those sweeping sort of AWS changes? Like,
yeah, yes, I do. Like one of the things that I talked a lot on. I had an OWASP event talking about the DNS and Route 53, and suddenly they took a couple of years, but they fixed it, and that is one of the most impressive patches I've ever seen. Like I dream of the day somebody tells me how that mitigation was done. It's like, seriously, like it's impressive as hell.
Yeah.
Like they do something out of the box thinking there. To be honest,
they really do. And I've tried, me and Shubs and plenty of other hackers have spent so much time trying to bypass that mitigation, because if you can, there's a treasure trove of bugs there, being able to reclaim these domains. But that was a sad day for me, man, whenever they fixed that bug, because that was my cash cow when I was in
But there you see, automation also have these, oh shit, now the curve going down, right? It happens in automation as well.
Especially,
I think it punches you harder when those things happen in automation. I forgot to say that, but when automation with something happen with your automation and it goes like that, that's a panic you don't want to end up with. Like that panic is worse than having a vacation and you see it go down.
Absolutely, 100%. Especially when you've dumped so much time into a technique. Like I spent weeks, months of actual time, like hands on the keyboard time, refining my Route 53 flow. And just to be clear, Route 53 takeovers are still possible in some capacity, but it's
very limited compared to before.
Very limited.
Yeah. And so definitely changed a lot. And that was the day the music died for me. That was the day that I was like, you know what? I think I'm done with this shit. And so, all right. So, man, I missed so many articles. When I just going back, I just kind of cherry picked some of my Franz, favorite moments. But now I'm starting to remember.
I post things? Because the bugs turn boring after a while, right? This is my outlet to like eliminate me from looking at them anymore, because I hope that someone else will look for them. That sounds pretty cocky. I
was going to ask if you take notes, but
it's my that's true. But it's my way of like moving forward. Like if I out like myself in a way that like my secret tricks, if I just get them out there, I can move on in finding new things. It pushes me forward.
And that's amazing for the community too. What a benefit. And Franz, can I ask? I mean, do you like writing in particular? Like, would you say that you enjoy writing?
Yeah, I think it's a necessity almost, since I spend so much time on like writing reports. However, like it's hard for me to like sit down and say, now I'm gonna skip hacking and now I'm gonna write a blog post about something, because as what often happens is like I'm not writing a short little blog post of what I did yesterday. It's like it's gonna be like a huge article, and I have one here that I'm still cooking on. It's been cooking since January, and I know for a fact that I can't start directly going at it. I need to explain a lot of shit before I can come to the conclusion of what I found, and it's gonna take a week, 2 weeks maybe, and it's gonna be painful. Like a big part of writing blog posts for me is like painful, going back and realize how hard everything was, or how long it took. And like, I really want to emphasize that also in the latest blog post I have. It's like, it's a big focus on how much pain goes into like spending that time.
And it's great that you mentioned that, because I will, and I'm not sure if you're talking, because you mentioned just a second ago, you had a blog post you're working on, I think yesterday. So I'm very interested to pick your brain on that. But I'm talking about the account hijacking using Dirty Dancing one of my notes for that one, and it's on the list that we'll talk about later. But that blog post is so beautiful because it talks about the ups and downs of doing security research, right? And it talks about like this whole concept of, well, these gadgets it needed to leak these tokens and stuff like that. The stars have to align in so many ways for these
Sure.
to be there. And
Absolutely.
and when you go out there and you're like, man, I feel like this might be a systemic issue. You're challenging something, and you're betting against the odds there, and you're really like putting yourself out there by spending a shit ton of time to assess so many different things.
Yeah.
And I think it was great that you represented it that way in the article.
And I think not to destroy the discussion later about it, but one big thing with that, the whole idea about, like, my whole theory was not based on finding that bug.
Yeah.
Like, I had 0 bugs for such a long time during that.
Wow.
I didn't even have one, I had 0 bugs. I just had a theory that, this would be so beautiful if you could get this working. Like, I had a discussion in the office here. I came here and like, I'm having a theory I'm working on, but I don't know if it's going to work. Like, this is my idea. And if this works, then maybe, like, crazy, right? And then like, I had nothing. so it was such a gamble. It was 100% a gamble on, like, let's then go look for it. Like, I had no idea how to do it. So that was very painful also in the way of, like, I'm really trying to, as you said, like, getting the stars to align. But then suddenly, like, one of my favorite programs turned out to have that thing. That was the trigger that, I'm right. Like, there is something here. Can I come up with other, gadgets or whatever? So everything came out of ideas, not from like real life. That was the big difference with that blog post. All other blog posts are based on reality first, and then I'm moving backwards, trying to, like, see a systemic issue about it. This was 100% idea, trying to squeeze it in, like, very fitted into 10 years since the blog post I learned from. Like, everything was aligned. Like, can I write a good OAuth blog post 10 years after my idols wrote one? That would be so. It was very much like, I really need to find a way for this to work. So
so when you're, like, approaching stuff, like, we've talked a little bit about this, of sort of like the really out of the box type of thinking versus the, like, more like data driven, context driven, developer driven type of methodology. Do you like going down that route of more just like, maybe this is happening, or do you find that it doesn't really pay off most of the time?
So it doesn't pay off a lot of the times. So I mentioned the Google Cloud Storage, the cloak. Like, that was the whole idea with that research, was to find systemic issues around that. Like, we found some of them, but they weren't, I wouldn't say you couldn't execute them in bug bounty programs. You could maybe execute them, if you want to report things to Google, but for Google, in Google's aspect, they wouldn't be like really bad bugs. They would be like coincidental misconfigures together with like odd, odd configurations for Google, but also for the customer using them and stuff. But so that turned out to be like, we don't really have anything. We have a decloak tool. Maybe that could be fun to blog about. Maybe we can do like a decloak blog post talking about the ways we found these decloaking mechanisms. And maybe that could be interesting. Like, now I'm forcing myself to write these blog posts because it would be weird talking about the blog post that I haven't written.
So you mentioned before, one motivation for writing the blog post is, it gets it out of your head and allows you to move on to something different. Yeah. So I think that's a really great takeaway. I wanted to ask about, because you're releasing all of these on Detectify, on the Detectify blog. And so is that an intentional decision? Is that to help, Detectify build brand recognition? Because let me just provide some context from my perspective as a hacker. Like, I don't use Detectify. I'm not an organization, where I could use Detectify. Yeah. But my respect for Detectify is like, very high because of all this super high quality research. Same sort of thing you see with Acido, right? Where they're constantly putting out high quality research. So, besides the motivation of getting it out of your head, what are some other motivations that you have for doing the blog posts and hosting them on Detectify?
I think one important aspect is like, I've been a part of it for so long, so it's important for me to like I respect the whole team so much that I want to show them that it's like very important part of who I am and where I'm at, as well as like sometimes I actually, like, me and Frederick sometimes collaborate on blog posts, and he's you know, working here from day to day as well. So I think it's like this office for me is a very good way of doing, you know, what's it called, like brainstorming and things, like trying to figure out things. So most often I tend to present to them first what I'm thinking about, and then because of the knowledge here, I can get like feedback on like, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that, or maybe you should call it dirty dancing, which was like it was great. Like Emily in the office, like, you should call it, it's like sounds like dirty dancing to me, like that's a good name. So I think that it's very helpful having a context nearby where a lot of people know exactly what you're talking about and you know the technology. So I think that's very helpful. Also, like I'm obviously still a part of the Detectify,
right?
Not that I'm writing any code, and I shouldn't, but but it's and I think also like I don't have a big gain, I think, on like making my own personal blog and creating a name out of that. I'm more than happy to like attach myself to a company that I value and like I'm a part of, much more than doing it, you know, privately trying to build a brand.
And you kind of get a 2-for-1 when you do it, because I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just the fact that your brand is already established, you know, in the community, right? You know, when we look at this blog post and we say, okay, Detectify is releasing this, but Franz is writing it, you know, you kind of get, you know, it's almost like, to put it in SEO terms, it's almost like you get domain authority on Detectify, and you get, you know, community authority from Franz. So it's a good thing. And man, when I'm thinking about where to go next here, there's so many, you know, we could go down the route of like, let's talk about dirty dancing. We could talk about, you know, hacking plus entrepreneurship. And I think that is where I want to go with this next one, which is like, so you come into this company, you know, you started Detectify with, you know, years ago with, you know, Matthias and them all based off of, you know, that security research. What role do you play in this company, and like what? Because to me, it kind of seems like you just kind of run around and you're like, hey guys, what if we did this blog post? And like, what if, like, have you seen this cool technical idea? And like, who the heck are you to this company? Like,
so it's a good that you say that, because like one of the things happening with the companies that I've built, when they are growing up, there is like a big discussion on like, how do we squeeze Franz into the regular, you know, day-to-day basis, like what can we do? So I was a scrum, what was that called? I was like a
scrum
breaker. No, scrum breaker.
Okay.
So I went in and like, we should do this, and like the whole scrum team is like, we hate you. So I was the scrum breaker. And so and every time when it gets like more than 40-50 people, it's like, how do we fit this weird individual into this organization? And it's like,
how did you so one of the things that I find really difficult, and even just the small entrepreneurial endeavors that I've been a part of, is delegating. Like, and so when you started these companies, have you had other players that are, you know, the executive players from the very beginning, or how was it hard for you to give up control or delegate, you know, jobs to different people, and how did you move out of that?
Okay, so I could say like this. One of the benefits I had was to have a business partner early on that was very much into sales and also into managing.
That's awesome.
I think that was the helpful part. So I always had to, you know, take the technical jacket on and be the one both in charge of the team doing the technical things, but also together with the team trying to figure out how to solve certain things. Like in the beginning, it was me building everything, and then we got like our first employee that was a developer, and we worked really well together so we could start building it also. Like this was an e-commerce platform. It's still alive. It's called Centra. It was smaller then, it's bigger now. But so when we started building Centra, I was always down on the floor, so to say, I was always a part of the team. That was like my whole concept of like, my way of managing in the technical team was to be just one of the guys. Like I was never, doing any salary talks. That was never my job. I was not doing any one-on-ones. So one-on-ones was done by someone else. I was the, CTO in the way that like, I'm going to play with new technologies. I'm going to try to execute them if I find something.
That.
And I'm gonna together with the team, like sometimes make a smaller team out of the bigger team just to make something reality as fast as possible. But that thing only works when you go up to like, when we turn into 50 or 60 people, that's when it's like really hard to like take some people out of the dev team and get to do some fun new thing, and then trying to put them back again, and like everybody's happy. Like that's not how it works. So it became really hard for me to like be squeezed in and like get to play with the fun toys. So I've come to the realization that like I can build. I'm really good at like starting from zero.
Yeah.
And then when we get up to 40, 50 people, I'm like,
yeah, just like, roll it out of the picture.
yeah, exactly. That's basically, yeah. And I think it's good for everyone if I do that, because else it's just so much politics around.
I love how he says that.
On, like,
else it's this, like
else then that.
It's literally the programming
throw exception on it.
Is making it into the verbiage. That's amazing. Yeah.
So I think that's the aspect of it is yeah. I don't know if that was an answer to the question.
It is, man. It's a great, I mean, what a great position to be in. What a dream of a position. And I think so many people that have the entrepreneurial itch that are also technical people dream of positions like that, of like, okay, I'm C-suite, I have influence on this organization, but all the crappy stuff like sales and management, I'm going to just not do that. And I'm going to we all know that this is how it works best too, when you're operating in your area of expertise, when you're operating in your passion. So that just highlights the importance of trying to find someone who that's a partner that's very passionate about sales and management and that sort of thing, so that you each can operate in your own sort of, expertise.
Genre. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, expertise.
Yeah. I also love that like co-founder model where like it's really hard to be good at everything. And I think it's much more of an anomaly to be good at like both aspects of the business, like both the technical and like the really refined, like fine point, like how does the product or feature or service or whatever actually work versus like getting it sold and like getting customers and getting it marketed and that kind of stuff. And trying to balance both of those things as one person is really, really difficult. And oftentimes you either have to subsidize that temporarily by like either taking debt or using your own personal money to like pay people to do that, or you get just like drowned in doing everything by yourself. And every single day is like a 12 to 16 hour day, just like doing sales and also writing the product and everything also sending emails and doing like everything at once. And so if you can start out by having that balance, it's just like really,
but
really
it's
huge.
not that we realized that to begin with. Like I had salary talks, but the only thing happening was that I raised everybody's salary like way too much. So it's like we came, like we had a gift.
No more salary talks for Franz.
No, and we had like a Christmas gift thing, and we were like giving away iPhones, and it's like,
oh my gosh,
we had so little money on the first day of the year afterwards, and it was like, maybe I shouldn't do this. I should not be the one in charge of like, because I wanted everybody happy. Like that was So
I came into this podcast thinking Franz is like some hacker entrepreneurial genius, and now I'm leaving thinking Franz is running around annoying people until he doesn't have to do the parts of the job that he doesn't want him to.
Probably.
That's
the truth, I guess. But it's like, I mean, there's some truth also to like, we kind of realized like where is my execution the best, like the best place to be in, and like that was the way to like grow very fast.
I make a joke about that, but really, it that's the wisest thing to do, truly. And so there's I guess this is more of a personal question from my perspective. One of the things I've struggled with is releasing that and being like, all right, I actually just need to delegate this job to someone else.
Yeah.
And the reason why I struggle with that is because it's like, okay, well, a lot of times in the beginning, that means giving up equity. Right. And because you don't have the money, or if you do have the money, you don't want to, I don't know, just sink all of your life savings into a thing, which actually you hear about entrepreneurs doing all the time, which is just, awesome and inspiring. I mean, is that what you had to do? I mean, is that what you need to do? Is you just need to give the equity so that you don't have to do this part of the job, and that's the right decision from your perspective?
I wouldn't say we had to do that from the get-go at all to begin with, but I think our perspective of it has changed because of experience. Like in the beginning, we could actually, with a salary, get people engaged and get people to actually do things and build and have fun. Like we had a lot of fun building these companies because it was so much hands-on. We were like out there, we were, I was developing things next to the customers, there was a big like spectacle around, how we did business in the beginning. But then I think, I lost the thread. What was the question?
Well, the question is like, I guess at the end of the day, what I need you to tell me is that it's worth it to delegate these jobs, right?
So what happened then was that I when it comes to I had it.
Yeah,
it came and then I lost it.
And it's funny. I get those same sort of things when I'm in these situations on a podcast in particular, because it's so hard to keep the thread of it.
I had so much to explain there, but it's like I lost it. I think it's So what happened was that we got people employed without like giving away actual equity, because we both had a really fun place to be at because of the spectacle, but also because we were paying a fair kind of salary.
Yeah.
But then we during all these years. And I think also it's like how the society works. Like there's a much more talk now about, getting equity when you're building a startup and stuff. And we never really called ourselves a startup because we made money from day one. So we never, had a problem with, money wise. But I think
that's an important that's an important factor there, because if you're making money from day one, if you build your MVP and you actually have that validated by receiving money, then all of these issues of like start to disappear, because at the end of the day you can just hire someone and pay them,
exactly, because you do have the money. But then I mean a lot of the money I made in Bug Bounties have been invested into these companies, so we had that we didn't have that from the beginning, because that wasn't how it worked in the beginning, but during all these years we had that as a kind of a way to solve a bunch of problems with money, obviously. But then we also realized that a lot of people that stayed for a really long time, it was much more valuable for them and for us to give them equity and a part of the company. So that happened after a longer while, but now it's like almost, a standard thing. Like if you join a startup, you're getting a part of the equity in some form of, like a pool, similar equity pool. And but back then it wasn't, and I think that was helpful also into like, getting into that. But I would say like what happened now later on with getting a CEO, for example, like we didn't want to be the CEO of this company, so we found, or the CEO found us. In those cases, it's always, you need to give up equity, obviously.
Of course.
Because you want them to be like,
they have to be
fully on, active on getting the company to where everybody else wants it. But so I would say it depends on what kind of position you want to fill, or what kind of things. You don't need to give away equity for every single, person that joins. Unless you you can find some good,
zero money.
That's true. But I mean, you can find some nice equity pooling kind of things where you get like a vesting time and stuff. So you know that people will stay at least that time. But it all matters if you have like very key positions. Like then that discussion is relevant.
So I wanted to ask one more thing, and I think Critical Thinking is a podcast focused specifically on bug bounty hunting. So the entrepreneurial piece of this, while is absolutely fascinating to me, and I think many of our listeners share that interest, I think I may move a lot more of my entrepreneurial questions into a different segment that maybe we'll release under the premium Discord channel or something like that. One last thing that I wanted to ask about this was, when you were taking bug bounty money and putting it into the companies, how were you thinking about that mentally? Were you thinking about that as, this is Franz's money that he's investing into the company? Or were you thinking, I'm working for the company and I'm generating this income that is just getting directly put right into the company?
Yeah. So what happened was, me and my business partner, we're 50-50. And this was my way of providing. So what I did was providing quick capital and like monetary wise the capital. But he was building, like he was in charge of being the CEO and everything in the beginning. So he was in charge of building the company, making the company more valuable. But I was bringing in the quick bucks to actually make it, much more easy to solve problems
and to scale easier.
To scale easier. So we both agreed that, like, we're putting in different things, but we need to align somewhere here where, like, it's fine for me and still fine for him. And, like, I think it's a weird balance also, especially when the bug bounty is like, you can go from 1 month you're getting this amount, and a live hacking event you get this amount, and it turned really complex in the end, and it turns into a lot of money if you're good at what you're doing. So I think in the end it was probably like, we don't have this setup anymore, and I think that's probably for the best, because it can clearly, like, misalign interests
100%.
over time, especially when it
now you've got a bug bounty company where Franz does hacking and then we pay employees,
primary
income
it's complex.
Stream is Franz's bugs.
Exactly. It's
that's
like
great.
Like bug hunting as I don't know what to call it. It's like funding by bug bounty hunting.
For sure. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and cross off my hacking plus entrepreneurial section here. Thank you for those awesome insights, Franz. That's awesome. And I know you and I have had some personal chats, from time to time about entrepreneurship plus
that's a good one.
what was it? Was it automationist? Entrepreneurship. Plus hacking. So definitely a lot of wisdom to be received there. Bringing us back on track to the hacking stuff, I did want to talk about one of my favorite talks that you've ever done, which just essentially looked like prophecy to me, looking back in the past, which is your Attacking Modern Web Technologies talk that you did in 2018, almost exactly 5 years ago. And Attacking Modern Web Technologies, there were so many awesome pieces to this. There was app caches and service workers. There was postMessage stuff. There was
upload policies.
The policies, the S3 policies, all sorts of stuff all over the place. So once again, mandatory reading for anybody who's listening. The crazy thing to me about this talk is, like, this is still the stuff that we're talking about today. Like, and this was 5 years ago, right?
Yes,
and
it's still applicable. Like, I find bugs, sometimes I need to go back to those slides because I find bugs for those things.
Exactly.
They have extremely long lifespan, those blog posts. I'm surprised myself that it's, like, still working.
And this is something that's really, I think, a key listen, and also helps for your brand as well, Franz, is that Franz was talking about this stuff, not only doing this stuff, but talking about it publicly in 2018, 5 years ago. And we talk about postMessage still being an underserved technology even to this day. So keep an eye on anything Franz releases, because it will very likely be applicable for the future. So talk to me a little bit about app cache and service worker stuff, and then in conjunction with that, the beauty of the synergies between cookie stuffing and these technologies. Yeah.
So I think the interesting part with the app cache that happened there were many fun things with it, but my aspect of it was that I had a really old Dropbox account and the old Dropbox account were like grandfathered into a place where you could actually host websites on dropboxusercontent.com. And if you created a new Dropbox account back then, you couldn't really run your own, like you couldn't render HTML pages and stuff. But if you had a legacy Dropbox account, you could. But it was very limited into what you could actually trigger with it, or like get it to render. And I came to the conclusion that, like, what can I do with an XSS or running an XSS on Dropbox user content? And I remember I was talking with Matthias then, and like, what can we do? Like, can we do something? And we came to the conclusion, like, okay, cookie stuffing we can do. So you can make it like unable to actually load, because you're filling up the cookie jar so much. So when you're making a request later on, it will fail.
So question here. So essentially what was happening is you were able to host your, attacker controlled content on a domain with other victim content on that same domain, right?
Yeah, exactly. What happened was you got like a user directory on Dropbox user content that you could host data on. And then you could, I think it was that
I can see it now, and I'll reference it. Yeah. It's slide 15 for any of those of you that are following along here. He's got dl.dropboxusercontent.com/u, and then the user ID, and then wherever you would update stuff. And you got the XSS not by uploading an HTML file, but by using
SVG.
Yeah. Well, I think it was an XML.
No, XML. Yeah. You're right. Yep. Yes. XML. Yeah. So that was the thing. Everything else was like, getting downloaded and onto disposition attachment. But that was the way. But if you had a new Dropbox account, you would never get the URL to Dropbox user content. It was only the legacy Dropbox account that really had that feature enabled. So that was the weird part first with having that. So we knew that we could do cookie stuffing, and what would happen then if somebody else sent a link, that would like 404 and or the 405 or something. Or 550 or something.
411, I think maybe actually. Yeah. So that concept of cookie stuffing, I learned that from you and from File Descriptor. And so I think it was File Descriptor
that I learned it from.
It was from. I was going to ask, where did you get that knowledge? And of course, it goes back to another legend, File Descriptor.
Yeah, File Descriptor, man. And the funny thing with this bug was that I think Matthias was the one mentioning. We're coming back to File Descriptor. So he mentioned App Cache, and I started reading up on what App Cache was doing, and Matthias as well. And we started like playing with that, and realized that we could, host reference a manifest in the XML file. That manifest would then be loaded, and that manifest could be like a regular text or whatever.
Sure.
And that text could contain and say that if you're unable to reach this website, you should have a fallback page of this and that.
Sure.
Because the whole app cache thing was based on you running an app and you're going offline with your cell phone. So you need to, if you reload the page, you can still visit it.
This is crazy.
Absolutely crazy. And what happened was that we realized that in our user path, we could put an HTML file or an XML file, and we could say that this is the one that should be loaded if you can't reach the website. And then we realized, okay, does the cookie stuffing result in this thing? And it turns out that yes. So we cookie stuffed and made sure that if you clicked on any other link, we would just steal the URL and then steal the page of that signed URL ourselves.
That's amazing.
But the weird part was that when we did this blog post, I don't know exactly date-wise. So our bug to Dropbox was here and then here.
Yeah.
And then File Descriptor comes out with a talk explaining this bug. And we were like, but what? So that was when we got the Dropbox bug published, so we could show that we also figured this out.
That's crazy.
And so he actually did a talk on, I think, on OAuth talk or something else. But and so we came to the same kind of conclusion, which was great. So I wanted to like highlight that sometimes people can like figure out the same kind of things at the same time. And as you mentioned, there's like the new thing, I think I mentioned it as well, like service workers was a replacement for app cache But back then, I think it was like very hard to like get a service worker to work, because you needed to have like a specific header on the service worker file to allow it to run as a service worker. And there were a lot of like if this and that had to work to make it actually exploitable.
It seems like there's definitely been some change in that area now. And so, I've definitely seen service workers used in lots of different contexts. I believe you, and I always have to, go back and look at it, but I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 99% sure that service workers can be installed without a header now. And the header, that if you do supply an HTTP response header, what that will allow you to do is reassign the root path, the authority for that service worker. So if you, even though you're installing the service worker at like /js/sj.js or whatever, or sw.js, then you would normally just have authority for the /js directory. But if you're able to serve that service worker allowed, I think, header, then you can get and say, hey, give it permission to /, then you can now affect all the resources inside of
run
/
everywhere. Nice.
And it's such an interesting technology, especially when you pair it with something like subdomain takeover or file upload, because you can gain sort of a persistence in the browser as well, using service workers, and we've seen this also with Truffle Security released a tool called Of Cores. I'm not sure if you've seen it, Frans, but it uses a service worker in the background to gain more time to be able to attack different websites that have vulnerable cores configurations, even if you just visit the page for just an instant. So there's so many, I think, applicable, exploitation scenarios for service workers that we got to keep our eye on, because they have tremendous impact.
No, and I agree, but like I guess the core concept first is like you need to have an XSS to begin with, and then you probably need to have arguments on why that XSS wasn't important in the beginning. And I guess like storage, like a bucket storage is a good argument on like an XSS there doesn't do anything, but if you have persistence, you can like show. And I think that was what the bug showed, was like it's a sandbox domain. It doesn't have any impact, but you have persistence, and that's the way to like gain access to other URLs and stuff.
I just thought about something, Franz. One of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later, assuming we don't have to cut for time, is this middleware misconfigurations that you talked about. So what if we changed that, right? Like we changed the middleware misconfiguration, and so now we can use that to hit a different bucket on the. So just to be, I'm going to give the TLDR of the middleware misconfiguration thing. If you essentially, with some Nginx configurations, if you put a bunch of escape characters, new lines and stuff like that in the URL, and they have some specific proxy pass rules, then you will be able to rewrite the rest of the request and hit other S3 buckets or other backend entities.
And host your own content, basically.
Exactly. So what if we chained that with service workers, right? Where you could then hit your own S3 bucket and issue. But I'm wondering,
you still have stored XSS, I guess. Like somebody needs to visit your URL still. And that one would still make you host whatever content you want on that website. So, but the thing you're gaining is the persistent thing, that you can actually make it load. But they still need to visit it once.
Can you? I'm wondering though. Can you set response headers in S3?
Yeah, it depends. If it's S3 website, you can. Some of them, but I mean, you could also. If it's S3 website, you can still redirect it to whenever, like, and depending on like the CSP, for example, you can still redirect it elsewhere. I don't know if that helps you though.
No, because what I'm thinking is like, wouldn't it be cool if we could insert some new line characters, overwrite the backend bucket, right? Have the bucket serve a service worker, and then insert the service worker header to /. So now, we gain that service worker authority and get stored XSS on every single page that the user visits within their browser. I think that could be really cool.
I mean, S3 website would allow you to do this. If the S3 website if it's proxying you to S3 website, and you can inject something to modify what bucket it's going to serve as a website, you can inject whatever header you want.
I guess it depends on the host, because I wonder if we are hitting, so let's say they're sending a request to, whatever.s3.amazonaws.com, and then we overwrite the host header on that. I wonder if it uses that same load balancer origin IP for you to insert a header to hit S3 websites. Like if you put in, it doesn't. Okay.
No.
Bummer.
S3 website is also quirky because it only responds on HTTP and not HTTPS.
Oh, what?
I have no idea why. I think it has something to do with like you're supposed to put it behind something else, kind of CloudFront or whatever. But so they don't have the same load balancer, and you can't really get to S3 website from S3, as far as I know. At
Weird.
least.
Yeah, that's definitely
it's very isolated. It's like it's like an overlay over S3. It's like S3 website is like its own thing that renders whatever you want, basically.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to research that a little bit more in
sure.
depth. The other area that I was thinking that this could be interesting is with CRLF injection into the response headers, right? If you can do response splitting, assign the service worker allowed header.
Then you can make a service worker out of the response splitting. Yeah, sure.
That would be pretty lit,
But you need
right?
something to load it. I mean, you could probably make one CRLF to load a fake document, and one CRLF that loads a fake service worker with the header to install it. Absolutely, that should work. Yeah, sure.
That's some good
nice.
That's some good shit right there.
That's fun. Then you get persistence.
I'm just
interesting.
I'm thinking about all the possibilities.
Play
of that.
with it. I can see the gears turning in Dustin's head. As soon as he hangs up, he's got 3 programs he's got to go look at.
But
then you can probably escalate it to steal access tokens and stuff. And I mean you can probably do things with that. I guess.
And it makes it a lot more. It makes it. I mean, it's a little bit interesting, right? Because technically, what that could result in then is we could leak the user's plain text password without user interaction, right? Because like you said, what do we actually gain from this? Because at that point, if we have stored XSS, right, then we can just open up whatever pages we want in an iframe and then do whatever we want, right?
And do whatever.
Yeah. But one of the things that we can't do is without more user interaction, is leak the user's plain text password, assuming they don't have any crazy thing.
Yeah.
But
due to the persistence, you can get them to sure.
Which really escalates pretty much any. And then
I guess it's a reflected more than stored. But you turn it into more of a stored.
A client-side stored.
A
client-side stored XSS.
Client-side stored.
That's really interesting. And then this is a really good ATO mechanism, because especially if you then proceed to cookie bomb, like a specific path that issues an auth token or something like that, it forces the user to clear their cookies and re-auth the next time that they go into the application. And at that point, if you've got the service worker, you can hijack the plain text password.
Yeah.
This is some good. I didn't get you on this podcast more often. This is great. No, this is really good. Okay, so wow, as much as I would like to sit there and just think on that for the next little while, let's try to keep rolling. It's probably a sin, but I'm going to skip this whole section on S3 policies and cloud policy uploads, which is a really awesome part of the Attacking Modern Web Technologies talk. And I'm going to jump to something that we've talked a little bit more about on the podcast often, which is the postMessage stuff. So how did you? Because once again, you're one of the first people that I sort of introduced me to postMessage stuff.
Yeah.
Where did you? How did you come up with this? And then what was it like? Sort of seeing this. Did somebody else's research spur this thought in you, or was it just how does this work?
No.
Sort of vibes.
That's a really good.
Do you remember?
Question,
I guess is the first question.
No, I don't. I actually don't 100% remember where. I think I think like this. I think there were examples of vulnerable cases already
Sure.
Like, I wasn't the one showing that you can exploit it, but I started to. So I think I did a lot of focus back then on, I think it was Dropbox,
Sure.
maybe.
Yeah.
And I think it was, so it was also like payment providers. There was something, because payment providers tend to do a lot of, and you had to talk yourself about it.
Yeah.
And what happened was that there was a huge amount of payment providers that started moving over to postMessage. And you always had a really hard part finding all the postMessage listeners. So as I did back then, I was discussing with Matthias, like, how do we figure these things out? And we came to the conclusion that, like, okay, probably an extension. And then I sat down and wrote a bunch of, like, inside iframes deep, postMessage that get listeners that get triggers by actions, and a lot of different. I think it's still in the repository. There's like an example.html with a bunch of listeners, and just to like try to figure out what we can do about it. And I made my first version of the extension, and like, okay, this will be usable. Like, just the number, even though you have like 5 iframes deep a listener, the number counter on the postMessage listener Chrome extension will still, increase. Versus looking at the source events, global events, and you only see the iframe you're currently selected.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a terrible functionality. So I made my first version of this, and I talked with the Google team, because I told them, like, why can't you just, like, I don't want to start building an extension. Like, can't you just fix so you can see all the listeners in all iframes?
Yeah.
And they were like, no, this is how it's supposed to be, and blah, blah, blah. And
it's
okay.
terrible. And it's something that I talked about in my talk as well. But like, yeah, you got to do your you still even have to do your due diligence to go and show where all of the, to go suss all of the listeners, because something may not be utilizing that listener, right? So in that case, it won't show up in postMessage tracker. So you've still got to go through and do it. One of the, it's my fault as well, because I haven't contributed to that nice private repo you put me on for postMessage tracker. But I think it would be really cool to add a line that shows every time a postMessage tracker is registered and where it's registered. So you just like you get a request where you get a log in your console when it gets sent through, when a postMessage is sent through, you can also get a log when one is registered, so you can know, okay, well, my child Windows third iframe has registered a listener. That could be really cool, because that attack surface is all over the place, like you mentioned.
Absolutely. And I would say the most common ones I found nowadays are the ones not initiated from start, but by action.
Yeah.
So they just because so I have an example in one talk I did in Amsterdam for like a live hacking event. Basically what happened was that when you clicked on upload document, there was a listener started at that action. And then you could do whatever. You could basically read whatever document you uploaded, you could read it from the sandbox. But so there's a bunch of those like action-based listeners that gets triggered by things. And what I've seen lately also, and I think one of the biggest tricks that up my sleeve with the postMessage listener was the unpacking of the wrappers.
Yeah.
So basically everything is wrapped through New Relic or Rollbar, or there's a bunch of those. And jQuery also has its own wrapper. But the way of figuring out how to bypass the wrapper and then go directly to the function, so you can get like the real function that is actually being triggered, that was, I think, the golden nugget in the extension that was really helpful. And what I've seen lately now is like people using MessagePorts, which is like an addition to postMessage, where you send an initial postMessage with a port. And that port can then be, you can shuffle that port between iframes, but the one having the port is the one getting the messages.
Yeah. Dude, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I just found my first, bug using message ports in a live hacking event maybe well, I won't say exactly when because that'll give it away.
Nah,
but within the past year, right? And it was very interesting. And I think one of the things that was crazy there is it sometimes people will just get a port and then they'll just shove data into it without doing origin checks or anything like that too.
No.
So
exactly.
it actually even creates more complexity and more room for vulnerabilities when you're utilizing the MessagePort stuff.
Yeah, and it's fun because you can have a message port from one little iframe, and if you get hold of that message port, you can take it into a different iframe, and then the window thinking it sends it to the iframe is actually sending it cross domain somewhere else. So that message port you can juggle that message port wherever you want, which is kind of funny that it's like just a connection. It's basically like a socket that shuffles data.
I'm also kind of surprised that we haven't seen more post-message based tooling out there. Like, maybe I'm just naive, but your post-message tracker is pretty much the only extension that I've seen that does anything like this. So, one, thanks for doing that, because otherwise we would have no introspection into this.
I use it every day myself. It's the only probably extension I use myself, and every day I'm looking at it. So it's like it's a good example of like writing something that you would use yourself.
Yeah.
And it's 100% like that. Like it doesn't go a day without me looking at it.
I'd kind of like also to highlight, the importance of understanding browser mechanics and stuff like that. So let's say, for example, you post message stuff was just coming out or something like that, right? And you go to a page and you see an iframe open up, or not an iframe, a pop up, open up, and it does something, and then that change somehow seems to appear back on the original window, right? Yeah. And you don't see any HTTP requests, so it's not pushing it out to the server and not coming back, right? So you're like, wait a second, how the heck is this working? Because if you have an understanding of browser mechanics, you would need some sort of reference to pass it and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Same origin kind of works still.
Yeah, same origin is fine for that. Yeah. So it's important to understand, if it's happening cross origin like that, you can't just, say parent, or opener dot, window, whatever, and just define variables or trigger callbacks in the parent window if it's cross origin. So having a strong understanding of same origin policy, having a strong understanding of window references, those sort of things are essential to be able to identify these sort of issues
for sure.
As the technology evolves.
Absolutely. So. And I think one thing that I did some talks on it, but I think there will be a lot more bugs on it. It's client-side race conditions with postMessage. I think I was early on with it, but I think that there are much more places to investigate that might be similarly vulnerable to it.
I don't have, so I've got a couple client-side race conditions in place, bugs that I've found, and I'm actually doing some research on them right now, which I'll share with you after this chat, and maybe we can collab on it, because the implications of it are pretty gnarly, but I need to do what you did with OAuth 30 dancing and just work through all the pathways. Work with all the pathways to it. But I mean, there's so many things that can be said about that. One piece that is not super relevant to the bug or to the research that I'm talking about is the concept of client-side race conditions via postMessage when one of the people is using JSON.parse. So the thing about JSON.parse is that when you're parsing that JSON data from a string back into a JSON object, that takes computational power to load up all those objects, right? So I had a scenario when I was getting a post message at two different windows at the same time, right? And I needed to so this window was the first window that would receive the post message was relaying it to me, the attacker. But then that first window would respond to the post message and set some configuration settings, right? So I had to receive it.
You needed the message to be first, but you also needed to read it faster than the other
Exactly. One. So the first window that received it was using JSON parse.
String instead, matching, I guess.
Exactly. I used just substring right? To extract this variable that I needed
ID.
to send the message, and was
Nice.
able to win the race back to the first window.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so that's a cool little tip.
I love
for the
those.
listeners
Those
there.
things are beautiful.
JSON parse is a little bit computationally
Also,
intense there.
also, I think like the whole concept of sending object, like arbitrary objects. I know FileScripter made one of those using blob.
Yeah.
But there are a bunch, like you can send a regex object.
Yeah.
And so there's a bunch of these, like if this is not a string kind of bugs that you can find just because you're sending a completely different object with postMessage. I think it's like file, blob, regex. There's a bunch more that you can send over.
Wow, I didn't know that actually. I got to look into that, and I know that some providers have implemented frameworks where, like serialization and deserialization frameworks that just make my life terrible.
They are crazy. I know exactly what you mean. I've seen those as well. It takes a lot of time, but sometimes in those cases, I rather look for the syncs first.
Exactly.
Or like is it even, can
worth
I
my time to go down this path?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, totally.
Those are tricky.
I agree. Wow. All right. Moving along, I'm gonna hit this next one pretty quickly, but I will say for any of you that are aspiring to be live hacking event participants, this talk by Frans, live hacking like an MBH, a walkthrough on methodology and strategies to win big, is an amazing talk that talks about the live hacking event experience and how to do well at live hacking events. So we talk about a lot of this stuff as well. Also, let me just say, as of this past Vegas, I have been de-seated, unseated as tied for the most MVHs, and now Franz has taken back his rightful title as MVH master of sorts. So I will get that back, Franz. Give me some time.
At some point. At some point, I guess.
But this talk goes through essentially the live hacking event flow and actually some of the OG live hacking event flow where you would have to use Bounty Please, which is a tool that Franz wrote to automatically submit all your bugs in the beginning. What a crazy time, man, where you would if you didn't get your bug in fast enough, there was no bounty. Like, what the heck?
No, exactly. I think it was also you got duped. Yeah. Because if someone posted it before, you didn't have a dupe window, basically.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So yeah, it was kind of weird. It like incentivized building those toolings.
For sure.
But I know people. I think there have been live hacking events lately also needed to get in things quick. So I've gotten requests to like reignite that project, man. Because and I think it's also, to be honest, because a lot of people tend to write markdown reports themselves first, and then trying to get it in, squeeze it into the Bounty platform.
So for those of you that
my favorite part about Bounty Please, by the way, is that it's all written in Bash.
Yeah, I love Bash. Damn, I write everything in Bash, man.
So I was gonna ask that same question, Joel. Like, dude, why do you write everything in Bash? Like
pipelines, man. You can. It's like a functional language because you can pipe everything through everything. Like it's like that's where Python
pipe a Python script into some other Python. I mean,
sure, but now you like your whole script is based on piping data through, conversions and things. So I think it's just my mentality is not like this is a script and this is a pipeline with the script. It's more like my script is my pipeline. Or often I think it's like an organic thing of like my script is becoming a script because I used a pipeline, and now I'm like, so I think it's just my mentality of like that's, and I think I tend to use it so much also because it's like it goes so fast on building it.
Yeah, we'll roll away. We'll let that fly. We'll let that slide. No worries. Okay. And I wanted to talk to you about collaboration in live hacking events, and I want to read a quote from this article. And you give a lot of great advice in this article, or in this slide deck about essentially doing the work that other people aren't willing to do, focusing on the boring stuff, and configuring all the things that other hackers won't configure. That's the way to get the big bounties and the way to hit sort of untapped attack surface. And that's great. So I wanted to shout that out. But I also wanted to talk about this section where you said, where you're talking about teaming, because teaming is something that we talk about on critical thinking a lot. Joel is one of the few people, actually one of the only people I think that I've ever done, in my opinion, successfully done a collaboration with over the past 5 years, where it was a full, from the beginning to the end collaboration, right? And I think that's because I've been burned a little bit in the past on large teams. And that is what it is. Everyone needs to have that learning experience. But I get a little bit of a bad rap for being anti-collaboration now. I'm not anti-collaboration by any stretch. But you give some really great advice here. So let me read that. With regards to teaming, team up with someone that, 1, will put similar effort into as you, 2, might know stuff you don't, 3, helps you cover more attack surface, 4, you can communicate with and brainstorm. And then you say,
both,
right, exactly. If you look at freaking Matthias's DMs, it might seem more of a brainstream than a brainstorm.
I mean, it makes sense. Brainstream also.
And then you say, keep teams small, 2 to 4. If 3 or more, effort will differ. Allow splitting differently. For 2 people, 50% is always the simplest. So that was sort of like the brain dump of collaboration wisdom you did back in the day. Do you still hold to all that?
Absolutely, 100%. I think, and I think it's very interesting also in terms of like where, when, like I do try to collaborate with new people all the time, and once or twice, sometimes maybe around one bug, and sometimes maybe during an event or during just a target, sometimes even, and I always come to the conclusion that it's like a lot easier to do with 2 people, because then it's much easier to, it's very simple. Then if both are collaborating, then the full team is there. But if you're 3, maybe 2 of them are working together one night, the other one can't, and like it just after 2, it becomes like really hard to align that everybody's doing equal work, because you don't want to end up in, like, me personally would not like to end up in the scenario where I get paid for doing nothing, and I hope that other people don't feel great about that either. It's like, because I sometimes feel bad with one person when that person is providing much more than I do, but I at least try to put in the time trying to find things, but so I struggle a lot with, often with like, I don't need to be collaborator on this thing because I didn't do anything, that kind of mentality myself. So I really I enjoy people having the same kind of mentality themselves, and you quite quickly notice the ones that don't really care and like almost gets to ride on a sandwich. It's a Swedish proverb, but like gets to do things, are getting paid for not
what
doing
the frick
anything.
kind of proverb is that? Ride on a sandwich?
Riding on a sandwich.
It's actually ride on a shrimp sandwich.
What the frick?
Yeah. It's like, yeah. I don't
awesome.
Yeah, it's weird, but yeah. So it's and so that's why, like, when you identify the people that like kind of align with you on those things, it becomes so much easier to like collaborate and like just focus on the fun stuff, which is the hacking part, and try to find the best way to escalate the bug.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I really love about live hacking events, is that I find that more often than not, any random person at a live hacking event that I walk up to, I'm able to almost like jump the line and get to a communication level that like is very hard to establish with other people just out of the gate. And part of that, I think, is just that like we all have a similar kind of technical background. We all have a very common like base of knowledge about like web security, or just security in general, and like the types of bugs and stuff. And if you can get past that and just start talking immediately about like technical problems and being on the same page, it helps so much with actually making progress with bugs. I see this all the time when me and Justin co-hack, essentially, where we'll sit down at a live hacking event and maybe one of us will drive and the other one's just really just like sitting there, like looking, like seeing, and like the communication, like we don't even speak in sentences. It's just like, what?
Exactly.
He'll be like, oh, that's really, I'll be like, yeah, I mean, have we tried doing X, Y? Like, and we don't even like, we kind of just like, we're looking at the same thing, we're consuming the same thing, and we can kind of jump through communication and almost in shortcuts. And I really love being able to do that. When you get to like more and more people, that starts to fall apart and it becomes less scalable. I think probably the most you can do that with is maybe like 4 people, where you have 4 people like sort of huddled around, like throwing ideas before you start to run into communication problems. Not even just like the like barrier to communication, but just like too many people are talking at the same time, or like there's too many ideas running around.
There's too many perspectives where it's like we're not, like we're never really going down a full path because somebody, if 3 people think one thing and the other person's like, but like, what about this thing? And then you get sidetracked. So it definitely does work best with 2, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And the times we've been 4, it has naturally become, pairs. So you have 2 and 2 that is like very much aligned. And we have done some live hacking events for people, but sometimes in those, like sometimes also like you need to be prepared to have like very tough discussions. Like if it goes well, you need to have tough discussions on like, hey guys, me and X put in a little bit more time than you guys. Are you all like fine with us getting a larger percentage of whatever it is, and those kind of discussions. And if you can't have those, or if they turn ugly, then it's going to be a really hard time to collaborate in the future. But if you can have those great ones, then it doesn't
the reason I bring this topic up often on the podcast is because I want people to be aware of the fact that there are some sticky situations you can get into with this, right?
Absolutely.
And so anyone going into collaboration needs to know that there's risk and there's reward, and you need to be ready to have these conversations. And here's the other thing: a lot of people will take the high road and say like, it's just money, it's not a big deal. But I've found that those people will harbor resentment. They'll leave that resentment in their heart, right? And that's not
sometimes without knowing, even
sometimes without knowing, and that's not helpful for the community, and so
I think it's absolutely important to, like, if you can feel that you dare to have that discussions with the people you collaborate with, that's a really good situation to be in. But because if you feel that you can't take that up, then maybe you should, I don't know, then it becomes like, if you feel that like I will put that back, even personally, like I will avoid not saying anything even though I feel bad, like as you said, like you would feel bad going forward. Like it's much better to like ease it up and say like, hey guys, like I put in a lot of time in this and so did he or something, can we do something about it? And let them see where they are, what they are suggesting, or maybe they are saying, yeah, we 100% agree. Then okay, then you can align that, and then everybody's happy. These problems, you don't really have these problems when you don't find bugs, though.
That's true.
Like these are like the happy problems. Yeah, it's good problems to have, and it's really good to train yourself to have those discussions, because you might get stepped on if not, and that's not a great feeling to have either. So I know some people are like trying to measure how much work they put in compared to each other and stuff, but I don't think that's a good way either. It's just gonna get dirty. But I think it's all around finding the people that are putting in the time that you need to try, right? You need to try with people and collaborate, and sometimes you find those matches. Like me and Shubs hadn't collaborated, but we did last year. For my first time, and like after that we've been collaborating maybe once a month, sometimes more, and it's like it's so easy to do it together. We're like, and also like him in Australia, like I have a bug, I go to bed, I write to him before I go to bed, like this is what I found. I wake up and he like, I found it, And it's like, but like, this is magic. Like, this is such a good collaboration, and turn a high into a crit just because like he found something I didn't, and that's just the power of collaboration. Me and Matthias does that every single day, so it's such a great thing to be able to utilize.
Yeah, I love that about collaborating. Like, often when I find somebody who I collaborate with really well together, it's not like it's not so much like I don't really think about who's found what bug or like how should this be balanced. It's like usually if it's going really well, it's that we're both frustrated about like the same things, and maybe like one person finds something that's really critical, but it's never like just like by themselves like in a corner. Like you two have both been putting in like a lot of the same amount of brain effort, and for me that's what really matters. Is like
absolutely
like what you said in your slide is like find somebody who contributes like a similar amount of like effort and you know time and that kind of stuff, because it's not really like how many bugs they're finding. It's like, are you on the same page? Are you both engaged at the same level? Like, does it feel like we're both putting in the same amount of energy? Because that combined energy will get satisfying outputs for both people, even if you didn't like find the exact payload or whatever. Like you were there the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And that's exactly 100% that. And also, like, I think with the whole collaboration thing, I mean, sometimes it's like the wins you do together it's like they last much longer than winning yourself, like they do. And it's absolutely not only money mattering. Like it's actually like we did this together. We spent this time to like we did all these things, and that win is like so much bigger than doing it
for
yourself.
sure. You know, Joel, that the one of the most foremost times that we collaborated together, that we did a full split collab, that is one of my favorite live hacking events I've ever done. And I think I was asked recently in an interview, what's your favorite hacking memory? The time that shell popped was my favorite hacking memory. So
absolutely,
I think I remember this event.
It's amazing.
You guys were similarly tired.
So the middleware everywhere and lots of misconfigurations to fix blog post, phenomenal. I think we're going to skip it for now. We talked a little bit about it in the when we were talking about the service worker stuff, and we're going to jump right to account hijacking using Dirty Dancing and sign in OAuth flows. I want to get in some technical details here. First, I just got to say, I love this concept of breaking the state intentionally, right? In the OAuth flow. Could you talk a little bit about that technique and why that's so helpful? Because I freaking love it.
Yeah. So to be honest, when I found that it was a technique, I kind of like, obviously it is. But I also realized like there is not that many things other than the post message that would be relevant for doing that or doing so, because there's not that much things other than post message today that might leak your full URL. So the whole thing with OAuth breaking the state intentionally is basically that you often have this state parameter where combined with the code that you're getting back. And the whole idea with the state parameter is that it's first initiated by the website that you're trying to sign into. And then the state parameter basically just gets sent through the OAuth dance and then comes back identical to what you send it. The website sent it as. And if it's matching, then it will go through the OAuth flow. So it's a fully, the whole mitigation factor here is that if the website itself decides on a state specifically for this user, it can set a cookie or whatever to make sure that it's the same state that comes back. It's actually a mitigation to prevent, somebody to send you a link and get you to connect to their attacker account, or a bunch of other CSRF-ish attacks with OAuth. But the funny thing is that the whole implementation of validating the state is happening before you acquire the code, which is like the best thing for the attacker if you can leak through your URL, if you can get the victim to use your state instead, because then you can just take everything. The code will never be used because the validation of state is before, and then you can take it and rerun the same code and it will
you know
work.
the original state because you generated the original state. Yeah.
I regenerated it and sent it to the victim.
The concept here is you've got an attacker. He's positioned in such a way that he can redirect a victim somewhere. So
or send a link to it.
Or send a link to them.
Send a link to the victim.
So they generate an OAuth flow URL that has a state that only the attacker knows, right? And he gives a different state to the victim. And when the victim goes through and tries to even maybe exchange that code plus the state for an auth token, once it bounces back from the OAuth provider, that will fail because the state does not match the internal state. And then the code is just sitting in the fragment. And then you can go and get that code and exchange that code plus the state that you know for the... And I've actually seen some scenarios with this where when the OAuth flow fails, it will redirect to a different location, right? And that can expose you...
Start site, for example.
Exactly. That can expose that data to more risks, which is rad.
Surface. Yes. Yeah.
So...
And the funny part with the whole state thing is also like oftentimes you don't, because there's a difference between if you get a code back in the OAuth flow, you need to get the code to convert into an access token. And most often you need to provide what redirect URI that was being used. And if that redirect is differing from the redirected URI that was actually being used in the OAuth stance, you might not get the access token. But breaking the state is like you're ending up on the correct redirect URI. There's like that validation is just like completely avoided because the same redirect URI, you will end up on the same correct place. But the state is the only thing that's breaking it.
It's awesome.
So it's actually like one of the reasons why some of the parts are automatable when it comes to dirty dancing gadgets and things, because what you can do is like you can figure out if there are listeners when you're intentionally like changing the state in a login flow. If there are listeners somewhere in that, coming back on the error page, you can like easily figure out that something is awesome. There for investigation.
Yeah. So, we talked about the ups and downs of doing the research in this article, which is phenomenal. Yeah. The other piece that I wanted to talk about was subbing the response type to token/ID token or ID token versus code, and how that affects how the redirect URI is used. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, the concept I found was that there are certain transfer mechanisms that the OAuth specification tells you to use depending on what type of data the OAuth provider is sending back to the website. What that means is basically like, for example, if you use if you want to get back an access token, the access token is never supposed to be sent as a query parameter. It's actually supposed to be sent as a fragment part of the URL. And the reason for that is basically that it doesn't show up in access logs on the website. You can still reach it with JavaScript, so the website can still get it, but it's not leaked to access logs or anything. The fragment stays on the client side, and it's client-side script that needs to fetch it. Same thing happens with ID token. ID token is like a little bit in between, but it tends to be more on the fragment side than on the query parameter side. But in addition to this, you have response modes, and some of the response modes will fail if you try, for example, to get like a token and you have a response mode query. Sometimes response mode query is a thing. Then you should getting an error. You can get it through either through fragment or it's called web post or web message, I think. Which is like actually sending data over through postMessage. It all depends on the OAuth provider, what they've decided on being the response modes. Apple made up their own. There's also one called form post, where it's submitting the access token as a post request to the website. And that one is, I think I mentioned it in the end as a potential exploitation factor, because Google has, even though you have like really locked up redirect URIs on Google, you can still enable a mode with parameters that tells you that it should post the data as a post request, but then you can select whatever URL on the website you want, even subdomains.
What?
So that one is ripe for exploitation.
Absolutely.
I think that one is not supposed to work as it should. I mention it because I wanted it to be fixed, and I think I do still think it's possible to utilize it. The thing I found with it though, it's like it's really there you can talk about stars being aligned, because you need something that either reflects post data in a way that you can read it somewhere else through postMessage or whatever. So because post data you can't reach with JavaScript unless you reflect it. The other thing you might be able to do is like, is there somewhere on this domain where you can get the post data to be read? And I talked with one of the team in Google, and he said on Google there is one. So you have scripts.google.com, which is like a script gadget. There you can have a URL that can receive a post request, and you can read the logs of it. That's basically, but they don't have OAuth danced on their own website, so Google don't have it for Google. I haven't found an exploitable place that can be used to submit the post request where you can later on read it.
I gotta go reread that, because that section seems so interesting. Yes. Joel, I know that this episode has gone long. Do you have to bounce right now?
I do have to bounce. So I don't want to cut this short, but I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna have to hop on and listen to the rest of this.
You're gonna miss the rest of this, OAuth stuff. But yeah, we'll talk about this more, and you can go back and review it afterwards, because there's gonna be some good stuff here. I can tell already. So peace, Joel.
But yeah, it was awesome talking with you, and
you too.
Hopefully you guys have a good rest of your conversation.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, that sounds nuts, and I think playing with those different types is really something that I haven't played around with too much, and something that I want to look into, because the impact of that is massive too, if you are able to leak those in any capacity. One thing that I was thinking about for the post message thing is like, it's very rare, but if you could find a 307 open redirect as well, you could hit.
Exactly, they will move it. It's extremely rare. But it might be like misconfigurations in their, load balancer kind of things. But 307s are hard. I'm collecting 307s, man. They're hard to find.
If you could do that, or well, I guess most of the time, because you couldn't really do it with a CRLF either. You'd really need. Yeah, you really need a 307. It's tricky, man. It is.
It's super hard.
That's so. The redirect, so you said sometimes different response types will have different places that they can redirect to. That's is that accurate or no?
I mean, that I would say that one is an exception, especially for Google. I would say that they are, in some sense, you're right, because what happens with the web message or the post message response type or response mode is that then any page on that, or because it needs to normalize the origin, right? So the origin turns into the domain, and that means that any page on that origin can read the message sent by post message. So in a sense, yes, the redirect URI will change in that sense, because it will just be any page on the origin getting that message.
I'm not fully wrapping my head around that. I don't think so.
But there you also have an attack vector, because there's a bunch of post message listeners that works as proxies. What happens is that when they get a message, they will relay that message to an iframe, for example. So if you can chain the OAuth web message, posting a message to one of those relays, that just relays it to another iframe, and then you can find something on that origin of the iframe. Then you can also find, like, that's another sort of gadget, you could say. But you still need to find something. Maybe it's like the Reddit bug I had.
I saw that one.
Quite similar. Yeah. So the Reddit bug was basically that they used the window name to transfer data over to their sandbox. And the sandbox had a bunch of XSS. People knew about it like long before. You could literally run your own Google Analytics on it. So if I ran my Google Tag Manager, and if I ran my own Google Tag Manager, I could run script on their sandbox. But because they named the window with the payload, the payload was transferred down through window name, and then you can read the fragment through the window name.
Yeah, we mentioned a different one, a bug sort of similar to that. There was a report that came out on Pixiv, HackerOne program, which is essentially the vulnerability was the app allows you to specify your own Google Analytics token. And if you can't do that, then you can leak all sorts of stuff. And with that, you could redirect the OAuth code to that a page that was using that Google Analytics token, which would allow you to leak the content. So there's all sorts of ways.
Through stats.
There's all sorts of ways that you can access that. And I think this account hijacking via Dirty Dancing one, it's a very long one, like you've mentioned. You like to do long write-ups, but this is something I'm going to go ahead and reread after this episode again, because there's so many pieces to this where. I
mean, the out of band things there's so many things that I've forgotten. Like that's not even it. To be honest, it's not even postMessage. Like imagine just having a tracker service or something that you can leak that has some form of API somewhere else that you can leak data. So the out of band gadget is like there's huge potential for research there, because what happens if you break the state, for example, you end up on the page, it sends it over to tracking service X and Y, but that tracking service has some form of history or whatever, not through postMessage or anything, but you can just utilize the same API key or whatever. Like there's so many things there that you
lots
might
of application
be able to
level
exploit.
stuff as well, that you can use.
Just because that one could be sent so deep into something else somewhere, and you can pick it up. Those are the nice ones where you sent the victim over there. It does a bunch of things, and then you're sitting here polling an API, and suddenly it shows up a API, a code or an access token, and you can steal it from there. Those are the most beautiful ones.
And the way you describe it as well, beautiful. That even shows a little bit more to the fact that these things, they take so much art. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier of like, I want to find a bug that I'm proud of, and sometimes that takes time. And so spending time looking at applications, like you said, sometimes it's 3 or 4 days before you find a bug. And I think a lot of people newer to the industry would really stress out about that, but if you put in the time and you really understand all of the fringe application logic, then you start to be able to chain together crazy stuff like leaking OAuth tokens via application functionality that, log stuff. So it's definitely cool to see. Last section that I wanted to talk about before I let you go. Do you have time? I know we're over time. Okay.
Sure.
Was hacking plus parenthood. So I wanted to, you mentioned before, sometimes you got a week and a half, and then you never know what that's going to look like with kids. I'm thinking about starting a family soon, and I'm a little bit worried about what it's going to look like to do full-time bug bounty and have kids around. Do you normally hack from your home? Do you normally hack from the office? Do you have any general advice about bug bounty with kids? I know that that's a broad question, but
it's a broad question. It depends on the age of the kids, I guess. But I would say like this. I was lucky with my first kid being a really good sleeper.
That's awesome.
But so that helped me hacking a lot during nights. That was also in the time where I was like almost addicted to it. So I really I wanted to put in that time. And I invested almost like sleep hours just because I was like almost monomania kind of thing. But then I think with my second kid, which was not such a great sleeper, I kind of came to the point where I'm like, that was also when I was working bug hunting and having two kids, and then I had to remove something.
So
it turned out to be work. The work went out the door actually. So because I felt that like I really want to continue doing hacking, and kids are gonna stay. So I think one of the aspects of it was that it helped me. Like what happened then was that I replaced my working hours with hacking hours, which has always been like, I've been scared about it because I felt like the funniest bugs I find is always 3 a.m. Like that has been a mantra to me, that's the way it is, because my mind's working in a weird way during nights. But that has kind of shifted now when I'm going deep diving, and because you're spending like 5 days on one specific functionality. It doesn't really matter if it's happening on night and day, because you're getting into that zone regardless during those hours.
Seems like there's some maturing that's happening here. Like
probably,
in the beginning, I very much had the same experience where I was like, wow, I'm very addicted to this. And I would easily say, okay, let me not go to bed and let me go and hack, And I feel like that was pretty, and it did get great results, but I think it was unsustainable for me in some capacity.
Yes.
And so I think as you kind of grow as a bug bounty hunter and you figure out, hey, maybe there are different options for this, it becomes a little bit more sustainable. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah. I agree. And I think, to be honest, like I still have this thing where I'm like, oh, I need to continue this. But what I've realized also is like the worst thing that can happen is that I stop hacking at the time where I don't have anything to continue with. That feeling is the worst, because it makes it really hard to start doing it again, because you're like, where should I go? Where should I go? So I realized like the best place I am is where I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm like closing down the computer. And I'm like, that like the day after I will wake up the earliest, I will go like do all the chores, everything. And then I go back to it, compared to like, I'm empty now.
What an amazing tip. That is something that I've never, out of all the things you've said this time, I feel like this little tidbit is kind of crazy, because like, that's so counterintuitive to me. Like, no, I wouldn't want to give up right as or like stop right as I'm about to find something. But if you do, you're so motivated to come back, and everything else just kind of seems to, it becomes so much easier to do the chores or the waking up early, because as soon as your eyes open in the morning, you're like, wait, I gotta try it, And so that's amazing.
And then you get like, so I always want to find the place where I'm like, I mean, I understand like if you're in the middle of like popping a shell, like, you
plus there's dupes and stuff like that too,
Yeah, but suddenly like you see an error message that stands out or something like ooh, like that's when I close my computer. That's when, because I'm like, okay, I have something for tomorrow. It's almost like it's night here. I will focus on something else, but there is something here, and I have a huge attack surface tomorrow that I can, squeeze and fiddle around with. So that it's a very short amount of time where I have the ability to like stop doing it, because I can continue and I will get to a point where I'm like, it's 5 a.m. and I'm gonna, take the kids to school and I'm gonna be terrible tomorrow. And I've been there 100 times, but I've realized also like it takes time to realize that, okay, I have a short time span here where I'm like, okay, I can get a good amount of sleep, but I will have some really fun days tomorrow or fun hours tomorrow to play with.
Dude, that's amazing.
It takes
practice, and it takes self-control, and it takes discipline, and
yeah, for sure.
Like the longer and longer I'm in this industry, you kind of see how all of this sort of becomes an art, managing your creativity and your
it's similar to
motivation.
Painting, I guess.
And so any techniques like this which can allow you to maintain that creative energy, that creative motivation, very important, I think. Franz, dude, this has been an amazing podcast. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all the wisdom which you've had over the years of doing Bug Bounty.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to shout out, or any socials you want us to advertise at the end of this?
No, I mean, shout out to my collaborators that I often collaborate with. Shabs, Avli Dimbrun, Frederick sitting in the office behind me. I'm having fun. Peter as well, a new collaborator. I haven't done anything. P4FG.
Dude, awesome.
was a great collab. Sayat,
yeah.
we're always poking at each other as well.
I'm gonna stop you there
shout out.
because I know
Yeah, I have so many. I can
I know
continue.
the experience of like you're trying to think about like I got to think of all these people.
I forgot about
that. I'm sure there are many more you could list, but Frans Rosén, everybody, you can find him Twitter pretty much everywhere as Frans Rosén. Just write out the name, and then definitely we're going to link down in the description all the Detectify blogs and stuff like that, which contain all of the awesome content from this episode in more depth. So, Frans, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.